You are nothing but a stain on this family, my mother. Bernice hissed, her voice dripping with venom, as she upended a tray of vintage red wine all over my silk gown. The dark liquid soaked instantly into the fabric, staining it blood red in front of 200 of Atlanta's most elite guests. My sister Tiana covered her mouth in mock horror, while her fiancé Brad snickered behind his champagne glass. The entire ballroom fell silent, waiting for the ugly duckling to cry "run away" or beg for forgiveness, like I always used to. Instead, I slowly pulled a handkerchief from my clutch and dabbed a drop of wine from my cheek. I looked my mother dead in the eye and smiled. You might want to check the label on this dress, mother. You just ruined a garment worth more than the mortgage on this entire country club. And by the way, I own the bank that holds that mortgage. Before I tell you how I brought my toxic family to their knees, let me know where you are watching from in the comments. Hit that like button and subscribe if you have ever been the black sheep who turned into the wolf. My name is Zara Jenkins, and for the last 6 years my family thought I was destitute. They thought I was struggling overseas, scraping by on odd jobs after I dropped out of business school to pursue design. The truth was very different. I was sitting in my penthouse office in Manhattan, looking down at Central Park, when my assistant placed a file on my desk. It was the acquisition papers for a massive block of real estate in Buckhead, Atlanta. My signature was the only thing needed to make me the landlord of half the people I grew up with. But before I could sign, my personal phone rang. It was a number I had not seen in years. Bernice Jenkins. My mother. I stared at the screen. We had not spoken since she told me I was too dark and too stubborn to ever find a husband. I answered, putting it on speaker. There was no hello, no how are you, just a demand. Tiana is graduating from law school, my mother announced, her voice as sharp as I remembered. And she is engaged to Brad Sterling, a real Sterling Zara. Old money, white money. We are hosting a gala next week in Atlanta. I need you to come home. I leaned back in my leather chair, twirling a diamond pen. You want me there? I asked, keeping my voice neutral. I thought I was an embarrassment. You are, she replied without missing a beat. But we are short-handed. The catering staff is charging too much for extra servers, and I need someone to manage the coat check and clean up after the guests. Since you are used to manual labor, I figured you could make yourself useful for once. Do not expect to be in the family photos, obviously. The audacity was breathtaking. She wanted her daughter to fly home to work as a servant at her sister's party. A younger, weaker version of me would have hung up and cried. The woman I am today saw an opportunity to inspect my new investments up close. I will be there, I said. Good, she snapped. Do not be late, and try to do something with your hair. You look like a savage. I hung up and looked at my assistant. Cancel my meetings for next week. I am going to Atlanta. And get me a rental car, the oldest, most beat-up Ford you can find. If they want the poor, desperate Zara, I will give her to them. I landed at Hartsfield-Jackson Airport 2 days later. The humid Atlanta air hit me the moment I stepped outside. I pulled out my phone and sent a text to the family group chat, which I had never been removed from, just ignored in. Landed at Gate B. Can someone swing by to pick me up? I watched the 3 dots appear and disappear. Finally, a reply from my mother. The Lexus is busy picking up the Sterlings. We cannot have trash in the car right before VIPs get in. Take an Uber, or walk. It will do you good to lose some weight. I let out a dry laugh. I had 3 cars in my garage in New York that cost more than their entire net worth. But sure, I would take an Uber. I arrived at the childhood home an hour later. It was a large, ostentatious house in a neighborhood that tried too hard to look wealthy. The paint was peeling slightly on the columns, a detail only a property developer like me would notice. They were slipping. I dragged my battered suitcase up the driveway. My father Marcus opened the door. He looked older, more tired, but his eyes still held that weak, dismissive look I hated. He did not hug me. He blocked the doorway. You actually came, he said. looking at my simple t-shirt and jeans with disdain. I hope you brought work clothes. The garage needs sweeping before the rehearsal dinner. Hello to you too, Dad, I said, pushing past him. I am staying in my old room, I assume. He laughed, a nervous wheezing sound. Your room? We knocked that wall down years ago. It is Tiana's walk-in closet now for her shoes. You can sleep on the cot in the basement storage room. Just make sure you do not touch the wine collection. I walked up the stairs, ignoring him. I stood in the doorway of what used to be my sanctuary. It was gone. Rows of designer shoes and handbags lined the walls where my drafting table used to be. My sketches, my books, my entire history had been erased to make room for Tiana's vanity. It was the perfect metaphor for our family. I was the foundation they walked on, and she was the decoration they showed off. I heard a commotion downstairs. The golden couple had arrived. I walked to the landing and looked down. Tiana stood in the foyer looking radiant. Her skin was light, almost passing for white in the right light, her hair chemically straightened to within an inch of its life. Next to her was Brad Sterling. He was tall, blonde, and had the arrogant jawline of a man who has never been told no in his life. Look who the cat dragged in, Tiana said, spotting me. Her voice was high and syrupy, fake sweet. Zara. Wow, you look dusty. Is that dirt on your shoes? Brad looked up, squinting at me. Is this the help you hired, babe? She looks a bit rough. Maybe we should have gone with the agency. Tiana giggled, a cruel tinkling sound. No, Brad. This is my sister, the one I told you about, the dropout. Brad's face transformed into a sneer. Oh, the one with the attitude. Nice to meet you, I guess. Hey, since you are standing there, grab my bags from the car. And be careful, the leather is Italian. It costs more than your life. I walked slowly down the stairs, my eyes locked on his. I did not stop until I was right in front of him. He smelled of expensive cologne and desperation. I could smell fear on men like him, men who lived on credit and their fathers' names. I think you are confused, Brad, I said, my voice low and steady. I am not the help, and I do not carry bags for men who wear loafers without socks. The room went deadly silent. My mother gasped from the kitchen doorway. Brad turned a deep shade of red. Tiana stepped forward, her eyes narrowing. Watch your mouth, Zara. You are lucky we even let you in the door. Apologize to Brad. Now. I smiled. It was not a nice smile. No. That night was the welcome dinner for the Sterlings. The dining room table was set with the good china, the silver polished to a shine. My parents, Tiana, Brad, and Brad's parents, George and Linda Sterling, took their seats. I went to pull out a chair at the end of the table. My mother stopped me with a sharp hand gesture. Not there, Zara. That set's for family. We set up a card table for you in the kitchen. We do not want to crowd the guests. I looked at the table. There were 8 seats. There were 7 people sitting. There was an empty chair right next to my father. It was not about space. It was about place. And my place was in the kitchen, out of sight. I walked into the kitchen and sat at the wobbly plastic table set up near the trash can. I did not eat the cold leftovers they left for me. Instead, I leaned my chair back against the wall, positioned perfectly to hear the conversation in the dining room. The Sterlings were loud. George Sterling was bragging about his latest golf game and his yacht. But I heard the tremor in his voice. I took out my phone and texted my chief financial officer. Run a full credit check on the Sterling family businesses. I want to know who owns their debt. While I waited for the reply, I listened to my father groveling. We are so honored to welcome Brad into the family, Marcus said. Tiana is going to be a top lawyer at the city's biggest firm. Her starting salary is 6 figures. I stifled a laugh. I knew for a fact Tiana barely graduated. Her grades were abysmal. The only reason she passed was because I had anonymously donated a scholarship fund to the school that subtly encouraged leniency for its recipients. A fund I called the ZJ Grant. They had no idea ZJ stood for Zara Jenkins. I heard Linda Sterling whisper loudly to my mother, "It is so generous of you to take in that other girl. The dark one. Is she adopted? She does not look like you or Tiana at all." My mother's laugh was brittle. "Oh, Zara, she takes after a great aunt on my husband's side. Very unfortunate genetics. We tried to get her to fix herself up, but some people just like being primitive. She works odd jobs. We keep her around out of charity, really." My phone buzzed. It was the report on the Sterlings. I opened the file and scanned the numbers. My eyebrows shot up. The Sterling family empire was a house of cards. They were leveraged to the hilt. 3 mortgages on their main house. The yacht was leased. Their construction company had not turned a profit in 4 years. They were drowning in debt. I looked up from my phone and listened to Brad talking to Tiana. "Babe, once we are married, we should look at buying that estate in Buckhead. My dad says he will help us with the down payment as a wedding gift." Tiana squealed with delight. "Oh, Brad, you spoil me. My parents are going to give us the deed to this house as collateral for our investments, right, Daddy?" There was a pause. Then my father spoke, his voice tight. "Of course, sweetheart. Anything for your future." I put my phone down. It was a circle of scammers. The Sterlings were broke and looking for a wealthy family to bail them out. My parents were cash-poor, house-rich, and hoping the Sterlings would elevate them. They were all lying to each other. And I was the only one in the house with actual liquidity. I walked out of the kitchen. The conversation stopped. I went to the fridge and grabbed a bottle of water. "Can we get you something, Zara?" Brad asked, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Or are you just hovering?" I unscrewed the cap and took a sip. "I was just checking the news," I said casually. "Did you know the interest rates on jumbo loans just went up? Terrible time to be over-leveraged on real estate, especially if your assets are frozen." George Sterling dropped his fork. It clattered loudly against the china. He looked at me with sudden, sharp attention. "What do you know about finance, girl?" I shrugged. "I read a lot. For a primitive girl." I walked out of the room, leaving a heavy silence behind me. I went to the basement and lay down on the cot. It smelled of mildew. I pulled up my banking app and transferred $5 million into my acquisitions account. The game was on. The next morning, the humiliation ramped up. My mother woke me up at 6 a.m. by banging on the door. "Get up! Tiana needs a pedicure and the salon is fully booked. You are going to do it." I opened the door, rubbing my eyes. "You want me to touch her feet? You must be joking." "I am not joking," Bernice said. "You used to paint your nails all the time. It is the least you can do to earn your keep while you stay here eating our food. Grab the kit and get upstairs." I considered refusing. But then I remembered the plan. I needed them to think I was submissive. I needed them to feel safe in their arrogance. I grabbed the kit. Tiana was lounging on her bed, scrolling through Instagram. She did not even look up when I entered. "Do not cut the cuticles too deep," she commanded, extending a foot. "And make sure the polish is even. Brad likes perfection." I sat on the stool and looked at her feet. "You know, Tiana," I said as I opened the polish, "I heard Brad talking on the phone this morning. He sounded worried about money." Tiana scoffed. "You are jealous. Brad is loaded. His family owns half the city. Is that what he told you?" I asked, applying a coat of red paint. "Interesting. Because rich people usually do not argue with their banks about overdraft fees at 7 a.m. Tiana kicked her foot, nearly knocking the bottle out of my hand. "Shut up, Zara. You are just trying to ruin my happiness because you are a lonely, ugly spinster. Mom was right. You are poison." I finished her toe and stood up. "Maybe," I said. "But poison usually comes in pretty bottles. Remember that." Later that afternoon, the real attack happened. My mother cornered me in the hallway. She was holding a small jar. "Here," she said, thrusting it at me. "Use this." I looked at the jar. It was a skin bleaching cream. Extra strength. "What is this for?" I asked, though I knew exactly what it was. For your face, she said, her voice dropping to a whisper. You are going to be in the background of the wedding photos. You are too dark, Zara. It clashes with the aesthetic. Tiana is ivory and gold. You look like charcoal. Use this cream. It will lighten you up a few shades by the ceremony. Maybe then you will not look so much like a field hand. I held the jar in my hand. The glass felt cold. This was the wound that never healed. The constant reminder that in my mother's eyes my skin was a sin. She hated herself, and she projected that hatred onto me, because I wore her original face, the one she tried to scrub away with expensive treatments and delusion. I looked at her, really looked at her. I saw the fear in her eyes, the fear of being black in a world she desperately wanted to be white in. I walked over to the trash can and dropped the jar in. It made a loud thud. You ungrateful little witch, she hissed. I am comfortable in my skin, Mother, I said. It is a shame you are not comfortable in yours. And by the way, I would not worry about the photos. I have a feeling the lighting is going to be very different than you expect. She raised her hand to slap me. I caught her wrist mid-air. My grip was iron. I was not the scared little girl anymore. I spent my mornings boxing with a personal trainer in Brooklyn. Do not. I warned her, my voice dropping an octave. Do not ever touch me again. She yanked her hand back, looking at me with genuine shock. I saw it then, the shift. She realized I was not the same Zara, but she was too arrogant to understand what that meant. Just stay out of the way, she spat, retreating down the hall. An iron Brad's suit, he needs it for the rehearsal. I went to the guest room where Brad's suit was hanging. It was a cheap polyester blend trying to pass for silk. Typical. I checked the pockets, a habit from my days of digging for loose change. I found a folded piece of paper. It was a letter from a collection agency. Final notice. Intent to seize assets. I smiled. I took a picture of the letter with my phone. Then I put it back. Brad walked in just as I was smoothing the jacket. He was wearing nothing but a towel. He did not look surprised to see me. He looked predatory. Hey Zara, he said, leaning against the doorframe. You know I have been watching you. You have got a fire in you. Tiana is great and all, but she is a bit vanilla. I stared at him. Are you hitting on your fiancé's sister? In your parents' house? He shrugged, stepping closer. I am just saying. I am a man with appetites. And I am going to be family. Maybe we can help each other out. You seem like you could use some cash. I could take care of you. On the side. I felt a wave of nausea, but I forced myself to stand my ground. I reached into my pocket and hit the record button on my phone. Tell me, Brad, I said, stepping back. Does Tiana know you like darker flavors? He laughed. Tiana knows what I tell her to know. She is a trophy. You look like you know how to work. I like that. So what do you say? A little fun before the wedding. I looked him up and down. You cannot afford me, Brad, he sneered. Everyone has a price, especially girls like you who come from nothing. I walked past him, stopping at the door. You are right. Everyone has a price. And yours is about to be called in. I went straight to my car, the beat-up Ford rental. I sat in the driver's seat and exhaled. I had the recordings. I had the financial documents on the Sterlings. I had the evidence of my family's cruelty. I called my assistant. Darius, are you in position? Darius, my fiancé and business partner, answered immediately. His voice was the only thing that calmed me. I am in Atlanta, baby. The jet just landed. I have the documents from the bank. We own the debt on the Sterling Company, and as of 10 minutes ago, we own the mortgage on your parents' house. They missed 3 payments. The bank was happy to sell the note to ZJ Holdings. Good, I said. And the scholarship fund. Cancelled, Darius said. The letter is drafted. Fraudulent use of funds. Tiana is going to have a hard time explaining why she spent book money on handbags. I looked back at the house. It looked smaller now. A crumbling monument to vanity. Tomorrow is the graduation party, I said. Showtime, Darius replied. Wear the red dress. I hung up and started the car. I was not going to sleep in that basement tonight. I drove to the St. Regis where I had a suite booked under a fake name. I took a long bath, washing off the feeling of Brad's gaze and my mother's insults. Tomorrow they would find out who Zara Jenkins really was. Tomorrow the ugly duckling was going to burn the pond down. 3 days before the incident with the wine, I stood in the center of my Manhattan penthouse overlooking Central Park. The morning sun gleamed off the marble floors of my office. My assistant Julian placed a thick leather binder on my desk. Everything is ready for your signature, Ms. Jenkins, Julian said, his voice crisp. The acquisition of the commercial district in Buckhead is complete. ZJ Holdings is now the primary landlord for 3 city blocks in Atlanta. I picked up my Mont Blanc pen, feeling the weight of it in my hand. This was not just a business deal. This was personal. I was buying the very neighborhood where I was once told I was not good enough to shop in. There is one more thing, Julian added, tapping his tablet. During the background checks for the adjacent residential properties, we found something interesting about the Sterling family estate. I paused. The Sterlings. My sisters. Future in-laws. What about them? They are insolvent, Julian said. The bank has initiated foreclosure proceedings on their main residence. They are drowning in debt, Zara. They are broke. I let out a low laugh. So the great white hope my mother was pinning her dreams on was nothing more than a fraud. Tiana was marrying into a mountain of debt, not a fortune. It was perfect. Just then, my personal phone began to ring. I looked at the screen. It was a number I had blocked from my mind, if not my contacts. Mother. I answered, putting the phone on speaker as I signed the billion-dollar contract in front of me. Hello, Mother, I said, my voice calm. Zara Bernice Jenkins barked. I did not think you would answer. I assumed you were likely working a double shift at whatever diner you ended up in. I am working, I said, handing the signed contract to Julian. What do you want? Tiana is getting married, she announced. To Brad Sterling. He is white wealthy and everything you could never land. We are hosting a graduation gala and engagement party next week in Atlanta. Congratulations, I said dryly. Send me a card. I am not calling for your congratulations, she snapped. I am calling because I need help. The catering company is charging a fortune for extra staff and we need someone to manage the coat check and clean the bathrooms during the event. Since you are used to manual labor and living in filth, I figured you could make yourself useful. I gripped the edge of the mahogany desk. She wanted me to scrub toilets at my sister's engagement party. I will pay you minimum wage, she continued. And you can sleep on the cot in the basement. It is more than you deserve, but I am feeling generous. I looked at Julian, who was staring at the phone in horror. I winked at him. I will be there, I said. Good, she replied. And Zara, do not bring any of your ghetto friends. This is a high-class event. Wear black and try to blend into the shadows. The line went dead. Julian looked at me. You are not seriously going. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the empire I had built. Oh, I am going, Julian. But I am not going to clean their bathrooms. I am going to buy their house out from under them. Get the jet ready. We are going to Atlanta. The Gulfstream G650 sliced through the clouds above the East Coast. I sat across from Darius, my fiancé, and the silent partner in ZJ Holdings, watching him review the acquisition files for the Sterling family debt. He looked up, his eyes filled with a mixture of amusement and concern. Are you sure about this approach? Darius asked, closing the folder. We could just buy the venue, cancel the party, and evict your parents by sunset. Clean, efficient. I swirled the sparkling water in my glass. Too easy, I replied. If I just destroy them with money, they will play the victim. They will say the big bad wolf came back to blow their house down. No. I need them to show their true faces first. I need them to hang themselves with their own arrogance. I stood up and walked to the bedroom suite at the back of the plane. It was time to get into character. I took off my Rolex, my diamond studs, and the custom silk blouse. I packed them away in a locked briefcase. In their place, I pulled out a pair of faded jeans I had bought at a thrift store and a plain gray t-shirt that had seen better days. I scrubbed the expensive makeup off my face, leaving my skin bare. When I walked back out, Darius raised an eyebrow. "You look different." "I look like the disappointment they expect," I said, tying my hair back with a cheap elastic band. "I look like the girl who could not make it in the big city." Darius stood up and kissed my forehead. "You look dangerous. Like a trap waiting to be sprung." "That is the point," I said. "Listen to me, Darius. When we land, you split off. Go to the hotel. Do not come to the house until the party, and whatever you do, keep my identity secret. I want to see what games they play when they think I have nothing. I want to see how they treat the help when they think nobody important is watching." "Understood," he said. "I will have the legal team on standby." We touched down on the private airstrip outside Atlanta. While Darius walked toward a waiting black SUV with tinted windows, I headed toward the economy rental lot on the other side of the airfield. The clerk at the rental desk looked at my ID and then at my outfit. "What kind of vehicle were you looking for, ma'am?" "The cheapest thing you have," I said, sliding a debit card across the counter. "Something that looks like it has a few stories to tell." He handed me the keys to a 10-year-old Ford Focus with a dented bumper and a distinct smell of stale cigarettes. It was perfect. I threw my bag into the passenger seat and gripped the steering wheel. The leather was cracked. The engine sputtered when I turned the key. I pulled out of the lot and merged onto the highway heading toward Buckhead. I was not driving home to a family reunion. I was driving into a crime scene, and I was the detective, the judge, and the executioner all rolled into one. They wanted a servant. They were about to get a reckoning. I sat in the idling Ford Focus, the air conditioner wheezing against the Atlanta humidity. Before I put the car in gear, I decided to run one final test. I wanted to see exactly where I ranked in the Jenkins family hierarchy. I opened the family group chat. It had been silent for months, mostly filled with Tiana posting photos of her outfits and my mother sending prayer emojis. I typed, "I have landed at Hartsfield. Is anyone available to pick me up? I am at the curb." I watched the screen. Tiana read it immediately. No reply. Then my father read it. No reply. Finally, the typing bubble for Bernice appeared. The message popped up. "The Lexus is busy. Tiana's Golden Doodle Versace has a grooming appointment at the spa. We cannot fit your luggage. Take a bus or walk. It is not that far. Do not disturb us again until you are here to work." I stared at the phone. A dog. A dog named Versace had priority over their flesh and blood. The dog was getting a spa day, and I was told to walk 15 miles with my luggage. I took a screenshot of the text. This was going into the evidence folder. This was the fuel I would need when things got ugly. "No problem," I typed back. "See you soon." I threw the phone onto the passenger seat and shifted the rattling car into drive. I merged onto the highway, navigating the sprawling traffic of Atlanta. As I drove closer to Buckhead, the scenery changed. The billboards for personal injury lawyers were replaced by ads for plastic surgeons and wealth management firms. I turned onto the street where I grew up. West Paces Ferry Road. The houses here were mansions set back from the road behind iron gates and manicured hedges. It was a playground for the elite, or at least those who desperately wanted to appear elite. I pulled up to the Jenkins estate. The iron gates were open, likely because the motor was broken again. I drove the beat-up Ford right up the center of the driveway, parking it directly behind my father's prized Mercedes. The contrast was offensive. My rusted gray compact looked like a blemish on their perfect facade. I turned off the engine and sat for a moment looking at the house. From a distance it looked impressive. Columns brick a fountain in the center, but with my developer's eye I saw the truth. There were water stains under the eaves. The landscaping was overgrown on the edges. The fountain was dry. This was a house of cards, and I was the wind. I stepped out of the car, dragging my cheap suitcase across the gravel. I did not knock. I still had a key, assuming they had not changed the locks. I pushed the heavy front door open. The foyer was cool and smelled of lilies and expensive floor wax. "Hello!" I called out, my voice echoing off the marble. "The help has arrived." Silence. Then the clicking of heels on the hardwood. Tiana appeared at the top of the stairs. She was wearing a silk robe that probably cost more than my rental car. She looked down at me, her nose wrinkling as if she smelled something rotting. "You are late," she said, not even saying hello. "Mom is in the sunroom. She is furious. You better have a good excuse." I looked up at my sister. The golden child. She had no idea that the ground beneath her feet was already sold. "Traffic was bad," I said, dropping my bag with a heavy thud. "And the bus does not stop at the front door." Tiana rolled her eyes and turned her back on me. "Just get to work, Zara, and try not to touch anything. We just had the cleaners here." I watched her walk away. I picked up my bag. The game had officially begun. I dragged my cheap suitcase up the grand mahogany staircase. The carpet runner was threadbare in the center, another subtle sign of their financial decay that they hoped no one noticed. I turned left at the landing, instinctively heading toward the door that had been my sanctuary for 18 years. I expected it to be dusty. I expected it to be filled with old boxes or gym equipment. I did not expect it to be completely erased. The wall that once separated my room from Tiana's had been sledgehammered into oblivion. My bedroom was gone. In its place was a cavernous walk-in closet that looked more like a high-end boutique than a part of a home. Floor-to-ceiling shelves lined the walls, illuminated by custom LED strip lighting. They were packed with designer shoes, hundreds of them. Red bottoms, crystal-encrusted sandals, velvet boots. I stood there gripping the handle of my luggage until my knuckles turned white. This was where I had drawn my first blueprints. This was where I had cried when they told me I was not good enough. Now my history had been demolished to make room for Tiana's vanity. It was a physical manifestation of my place in this family. I was nothing more than empty space waiting to be filled by Tiana's excess. "Well, do not just stand there blocking the airflow." I turned around. Marcus Jenkins stood at the top of the stairs. My father. He looked older, his hairline receding further back, but his eyes held that same cold, calculating appraisal I remembered. He did not smile. He did not open his arms. He looked at me like I was a bill collector he was trying to dodge. "Hello, Dad," I said. He looked at my worn-out jeans and the scuffed suitcase. "You look terrible," he said bluntly. "I hope you brought something decent to wear for the party. We cannot have you looking like a beggar in front of the Sterlings." "I brought what I have," I replied. He scoffed and took a step closer, lowering his voice. "Let me ask you something, Zara. And do not lie to me. Did you bring any money? Or did you come back here to beg for a handout? Because I am telling you right now, the bank of Dad is closed. Tiana's wedding is costing a fortune. We do not have spare cash to feed another mouth." I looked at him. This man was worried about feeding me, yet he was standing in front of a shoe collection worth $250,000. The irony was suffocating. "I do not need your money, Marcus," I said, dropping the title of Dad. "I can feed myself?" "Good," he grunted. "Because you are not sleeping up here. Tiana needs her privacy, and we have VIP guests in the guest suites. You are sleeping in the storage room in the basement. There is a cot down there next to the boiler. And Zara, do not come upstairs unless you are working or summoned. We do not want you making things awkward." He turned and walked away, heading toward his study, probably to check bank accounts that were rapidly draining. I looked back at the shoe closet one last time. I mentally calculated the value of the inventory in front of me versus the debt I knew they carried. They were walking on gold while drowning in deep water. I picked up my suitcase and headed for the basement door. It was fitting. They wanted to put me underground. They had no idea that is exactly where you plant a seed before it destroys the foundation. I had not even made it to the basement door when the double mahogany entrance swung open again. A gust of expensive perfume, Chanel No. 5, mixed with sheer arrogance, filled the foyer. Tiana stepped in. She was breathtaking in the most superficial, manufactured way possible. Her skin was a creamy caramel color glowing under the chandelier light, a stark and deliberate contrast to my deep mahogany complexion. She wore a white linen jumpsuit that was tailored within an inch of its life, designed to show off the figure my mother always praised while criticizing mine. Her hair was laid to perfection, chemically straightened, and glossy, rippling down her back like a silk curtain. When her eyes landed on me, her lip curled upward. It was not just dislike, it was visceral disgust. She looked at my natural hair, my thrift store jeans, and my dark skin, as if I were a stain on her pristine white existence. She did not say hello, she just checked her reflection in the foyer mirror, ensuring her perfection remained intact in my presence. Behind her, Brad Sterling stumbled in fumbling with his car keys. He was the picture of Southern old money privilege gone to seed. He wore a pastel linen suit, boat shoes with no socks, and a haircut that cost $300 but could not hide the thinning spot on his crown. He looked up, saw me standing by the stairs, and did not even blink. He did not see a sister-in-law. He did not see a human being. He saw a utility. "Hey," Brad barked, snapping his fingers at me as if I were a golden retriever. "You, new girl, don't just stand there gawking at the guests. The trunk is open." I froze. He thought I was the maid. Tiana covered her mouth with a manicured hand, a giggle bubbling up from her throat. She knew exactly who I was. She knew I was the sister who had paid for her abortion when she was 19, so our parents would not find out. She knew I was the one who helped her with her homework for 12 years, but she did not say a word. She watched, her eyes dancing with malicious amusement, waiting to see if I would break. "I said move," Brad snapped, tossing his keys at me. They hit my chest and clattered to the marble floor. "Go get the luggage, and be careful with the monogram set. That Louis Vuitton leather is worth more than your entire life." The insult hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. "Worth more than my life." I looked down at the keys on the floor. Then I looked at Tiana. She just smirked, adjusting her diamond engagement ring, a ring I knew was likely bought on credit from a jeweler my firm was currently auditing. "Go on, Zara," she purred, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. "You heard the man. He tips well if you do not scratch anything. And try not to touch the handles with dirty hands. We do not want grease on the leather." I bent down and picked up the keys. The rage in my chest was a cold, hard knot, but I forced my face to remain blank. I wanted to tell them I owned the bank that was currently processing their foreclosure. I wanted to tell Brad that his father was begging my assistant for a loan extension an hour ago. But not yet. The trap was not fully set. "Yes, sir," I mumbled, keeping my head down, playing the role they so desperately wanted me to fill. "Right away." I walked past them, smelling the stale alcohol on Brad's breath. As I stepped out onto the porch, I heard Brad whisper to Tiana, loud enough for me to hear. "Where did your mom find her? She is a bit dark for the front of house, isn't she? Usually you hide the help better." Tiana laughed again, a sound that cut deeper than any knife. "Don't worry, babe. We keep the dark ones in the back. That is why she is sleeping in the basement." I walked to the trunk of his leased Porsche. I gripped the keys until they cut into my palm. "Enjoy the luggage, Brad. It is the last luxury you are ever going to own." The aroma of rosemary-crusted lamb and vintage Bordeaux filled the hallway, signaling that the welcome dinner for the Sterling family had officially begun. I washed the road grit from my hands in the powder room and straightened my thrift store t-shirt. I knew I would not be welcomed with open arms, but I assumed I would at least be offered a seat at the end of the table. I was wrong. Bernice intercepted me at the double doors of the dining room. She looked immaculate in her emerald silk dress, a stark contrast to the disdain etched on her face. "Where do you think you are going?" she hissed, blocking my path with a manicured hand. "To eat dinner, Mother," I replied. "Unless you plan on starving the help." "You are not sitting at my table looking like a refugee," she snapped. "The Sterling family is inside. They are people of quality, We cannot have you bringing down the property value just by sitting there. You are eating in the service pantry." She grabbed my arm and marched me through the swinging kitchen door. In the corner, wedged between the commercial refrigerator and the mop sink, was a wobbly plastic card table. It was set with paper plates and plastic forks. Seated around it were 3 toddlers, the children of the catering staff, and a distant cousin who had been roped into free babysitting. "Sit," Bernice commanded, pointing to a metal folding chair. "And keep the children quiet. If I hear one scream, you are sleeping outside with the dogs." She turned on her heel and swept back into the dining room, letting the door swing shut. I sat down. The chair was cold. On my paper plate was a scoop of cold mac and cheese and a dry chicken wing, the leftovers of the leftovers. I picked up my plastic fork. Through the gap in the swinging door, I had a direct line of sight and sound to the main table. They thought I was exiled. In reality, I was in the perfect surveillance position. I watched as the servers poured wine. Linda Sterling Brad's mother leaned over to my mother. She gestured vaguely in the direction of the kitchen. "Bernice, darling." Linda said, her voice carrying the high pitch of feigned concern. "Who was that young woman in the hallway? The one with the unfortunate hair? Is she a relative?" My mother laughed, a tinkling artificial sound. "Oh, heavens no. That is just Zara. She is a girl from the church program. A bit slow, if you know what I mean. We let her do odd jobs around the house to keep her off the streets. It is our Christian duty." Brad chuckled, swirling his wine. "She is sturdy, though. Carried my bags like a mule. Good help is hard to find." Tiana joined in, placing her hand on Brad's arm. "You are so bad, babe. But yes, she is harmless. Just do not leave your wallet out. She gets confused about ownership." I chewed my cold chicken slowly. They were painting me as a thief and a charity case in my own childhood home. But then the conversation shifted. The wine had loosened their tongues and the posturing began. George Sterling cleared his throat. "This house is magnificent, Marcus. Truly. It reminds me of our estate in the Hamptons. Before we consolidated our assets for tax purposes." My father beamed, puffing out his chest. "Thank you, George. We are very proud of it. And we are so happy to welcome Brad into the family. We know Tiana will be well taken care of." "Oh, absolutely," George said, his eyes darting nervously to his wife. "The Sterling Trust is robust. We are actually moving some capital around right now. Very complex international holdings. That is why the bank accounts look a bit lean this quarter. Just temporary liquidity restructuring." I stopped chewing. Liquidity restructuring. That was finance speak for we are broke and hiding it. My father nodded eagerly, swallowing the bait. "I understand completely. Business is complex. Tiana is stepping into a great legacy. She is practically a partner at her law firm already. They are begging her to take the lead on their biggest cases." I took a sip of lukewarm water from a paper cup. Another lie. Tiana was not a partner. She was barely an intern, and she was currently on probation for billing personal lunches to client accounts. Brad raised his glass. "To the union of 2 great dynasties, the Jenkins and the Sterlings. May we all be as rich as we deserve to be." They clinked glasses, the crystal ringing out like a bell. I watched them drink, smiling at each other across a table built on delusions. 2 drowning families clutching at each other, hoping the other one was a life raft. I pulled out my phone and opened my notes app. I typed 2 entries. 1. Sterling's admitting to hiding assets. 2. Jenkins claiming false professional status for Tiana. I put the phone away and looked at the toddler next to me, who was smearing cheese on the table. "Enjoy it, kid," I whispered. "This is the last free meal anyone is getting in this house." The dinner party migrated from the dining room to the formal parlor for brandy and cigars. I was tasked with clearing the table. As I scraped half-eaten lamb into the garbage, I noticed George and Linda Sterling lingering in the hallway near the guest powder room. Linda was gripping George's arm so tightly her knuckles were white. They thought they were alone. They did not notice the shadow standing in the butler's pantry, just 3 feet away. "Pull it together!" Linda hissed, her voice low and sharp. You are sweating like a pig. They are going to notice. I cannot help it, George whispered back, wiping his forehead with a monogrammed handkerchief. Did you see the wine Marcus poured? That bottle costs $400. These people have money, Linda. Real liquid cash. If we play this right, we are saved. Keep your voice down, Linda snapped. We just need to get through the wedding. Once Brad signs the marriage certificate, our assets merge. We can use the deed to this house as collateral to pay off the bridge loan before the bank seizes the construction company. I stood frozen in the dark pantry, a dirty plate in my hand. It was exactly as I suspected. The Sterlings were not just broke, they were predators. They were planning to leverage my parents' home, the only asset of value Marcus and Bernice actually owned, to save their failing business. It was a parasitic masterclass. We have to be careful, George continued. That girl, the sister, she looks sharp. Did you see the way she looked at me when I mentioned the liquidity restructuring? Forget her, Linda scoffed. She is the help. Nobody listens to the help. Just focus on Marcus. Stroke his ego. Tell him he is a genius. By next month, the Jenkins estate will be the collateral for the Sterling resurrection. They straightened their clothes, put their fake smiles back on, and walked into the parlor to join the victims they planned to bleed dry. I set the dirty plate down on the counter. My hand was steady, cold. I did not feel anger. I felt the thrill of the hunt. They thought I was the help. They were about to find out I was the landlord. I pulled out my burner phone and opened the encrypted messaging app. I typed a message to my private investigator in New York. Code red on Sterling Construction. Verify outstanding liabilities. I want the account numbers for their primary lenders. The reply came in 30 seconds. Already on it, boss. They owe $12 million to First National. The note is in default status. The bank is looking to sell the debt to a collection agency for pennies on the dollar to clear their books. I typed back. Do not let it go to collection. ZJ Holdings buys the debt, full price. Tonight. I want to own the paper on every brick they own. Copy that. Consider it done. I put the phone in my pocket and picked up the tray of dirty glasses. I walked into the parlor to serve coffee. George Sterling was laughing at one of my father's bad jokes. He looked at me and held out his empty glass without breaking eye contact with my father. More brandy, girl, he commanded. I poured the amber liquid. Enjoy it, George, I thought. It is the last drink you will ever swallow without choking on the bill. The brunch guests returned to their chatter, the tension in the room dissipating, as if insulting my genetic makeup was just a casual appetizer. I held the jar of bleaching cream in one hand and the pitcher of cheap champagne in the other. Tiana turned back to her friends, flipping her chemically straightened hair over her shoulder, basking in the glow of her own cruelty. Bernice leaned back in her chair, satisfied. See, she told Linda Sterling. Tiana has a good heart. She is always looking out for the less fortunate, even when they are difficult to look at. I walked to the trash can in the corner of the room. It was a silver pedal bin polished to a shine. I stepped on the pedal. The lid opened with a soft clang. What are you doing? Tiana asked, her voice sharp. I held the jar over the bin. I am disposing of trash, I said. I dropped the $200 jar into the garbage. It landed with a heavy thud among the coffee grounds and eggshells. The room went silent again. Tiana stood up, her face flushing a blotchy pink. You ungrateful little brat! That was a gift. It was an insult wrapped in a ribbon. I replied, my voice calm and projecting to every corner of the room. I do not need to bleach my skin, Tiana. My skin is not the problem. Your insecurity is. My mother slammed her hand on the table. How dare you? Pick that up. Pick it up and apologize to your sister. You are ugly inside and out. That is why you are alone. That is why you are poor, because you do not know your place. I turned to face them fully. I may be the black sheep, mother, I said. But let's be clear about something. I might be dark, but my bank account is green. And you, Tiana? You are light, but your head is empty. Brad stood up, trying to look menacing. Watch your mouth, Zara. You are talking to future royalty. I laughed. It was a cold, hard sound. Royalty. Brad, you are not royalty. You are a court jester with a maxed-out credit card. Tiana shrieked. Get out! Get out of my sight! Go clean the toilets! That is all you are good for. I smiled. Gladly. I will go check the plumbing. I have a feeling this whole house is about to get flushed. I walked out of the sunroom, leaving them sputtering in their rage. They thought I was crazy. They thought I was delusional. They laughed nervously as I left, making jokes about my mental stability. Let them laugh, I thought, as I walked down the hall. I pulled out my phone and checked the transfer status. The acquisition of the sterling debt was finalized. I owned them. Now it was time to close the net on my own family. I walked past the kitchen and saw my father Marcus sitting alone at the counter, staring at a stack of bills. He looked up as I passed. You should not provoke them, Zara, he said weakly. You know how your mother gets. I stopped. I know exactly how she gets, Marcus. And I know exactly why you let her. You are weak. You let her treat me like a dog because it kept her off your back. He looked down. We are in trouble, Zara. Real trouble. If this wedding does not happen, if the Sterlings do not help us, we lose everything. I looked at my father. He was terrified. You already lost everything, Dad, I said. You just haven't moved out yet. I walked away, heading for the basement. I had one more call to make before the party. It was time to prepare the scholarship revocation. Tiana was about to learn that ZJ Holdings did not support plagiarism or bullies. The ZJ grant was officially closed. Did you hear that? Tiana shrieked, clutching her stomach as she doubled over in laughter. She thinks her food stamps are a bank account. Oh my God, Mom. She has lost it. Poverty has actually driven her insane. The entire sunroom erupted. It was a cacophony of mockery. Linda Sterling wiped a tear of laughter from her eye, leaning against her husband for support. Oh, Bernice, you did not tell us she was a comedian. That is rich. A green bank account. Does she mean she recycles bottles for cash? Brad pointed a finger at me, his face red with amusement. You are precious, Zara. Really. Maybe if you save up enough of that green money, you can buy a personality transplant. Or at least a wig that does not look like steel wool. I stood there, letting their laughter wash over me. It was not humiliating. It was validating. Their arrogance was their blindfold. They were so convinced of their own superiority, so blinded by the narrative they had constructed about my failure, that they could not see the predator standing right in front of them. Laugh all you want, I said, my voice cutting through the noise like a razor. But remember this moment. Remember how funny you thought it was when the ATM eats your card tomorrow. Get out, Bernice screamed, throwing a linen napkin at me. It fluttered harmlessly to the floor. Go to the basement before I call the asylum. You are embarrassing yourself and this family. I turned and walked away, the sound of their jeers following me down the hall. I did not look back. I descended the narrow wooden stairs to the damp storage room. The air was thick with the smell of mildew and neglect. I sat on the cot and pulled out my encrypted laptop. The screen illuminated the dark room. I logged into my primary dashboard. Julian had sent the confirmation. The acquisition of the Sterling family debt portfolio was complete. I now owned the paper on Brad's convertible, his father's yacht, and the construction company's heavy machinery. I was effectively Brad Sterling's owner. I opened a new window. It was time for Phase 2. The receipts. I typed a message to the manager of the Vera Wang boutique in Buckhead. I knew Tiana had an appointment there tomorrow morning for her final fitting. I also knew, thanks to my credit monitoring of the Sterling family, that Brad's credit card had just been declined for a tank of gas an hour ago. Authorize a temporary hold on the Sterling account, I typed to my banking liaison, and alert the boutique staff. VIP client incoming. Treat her like royalty until the card swipes, then follow protocol. I closed the laptop and lay back on the cot, staring at the exposed pipes on the ceiling. Upstairs, I could hear the heavy footsteps of the party dispersing, They were going to sleep in silk sheets, dreaming of a wealth that no longer existed. I was sleeping next to a boiler, dreaming of their eviction. The bank account was indeed green, and tomorrow I was going to use it to buy my sister's dignity for the price of a wedding dress. The delusion was over. The reality check was about to bounce. The morning sun beat down on the pavement outside the Vera Wang boutique, but the temperature inside the car was freezing. Tiana sat in the driver's seat of the Lexus, fuming, her knuckles white on the steering wheel. I sat in the passenger seat, the massive garment bag containing the $20,000 dress draped over my lap, like a suffocating shroud. She refused to put it in the trunk, claiming it would get crushed. "You are lucky I let you do that," Tiana snapped, breaking the silence as she merged aggressively into traffic. "Most sisters would kill to buy my wedding dress. It is an honor, Zara. You should be thanking me." I stared out the window, watching the luxury shops of Buckhead blur past. "An honor," I repeated flatly. "Is that what we are calling it? I call it extortion." "Watch it," she warned. "Brad is going to be the CEO of Sterling Construction next month. One word from me and you are scrubbing floors in the executive suite. Or you are back on the street. Do not forget who holds the keys to your future." I almost laughed. She thought Brad was a kingmaker. She had no idea he was a pauper in a rented suit. We pulled up to the estate. My father was waiting on the porch, looking anxious. He rushed to the car as Tiana parked. "Did you get it?" he asked, ignoring me completely. "Is the dress secured?" "Yes, Daddy," Tiana said, stepping out and smoothing her skirt. "But we had a little issue with the cards. The bank is being so annoying with these security holds." Zara had to put it on her little debit card. "You need to tell Brad to fix the limits before the party tonight." My father's head snapped toward me. He looked at the dress, then at me, then at the beat-up Ford parked behind the Lexus. He did not ask how I had $20,000. He did not ask if I needed to be reimbursed. He just looked relieved. "Good," he muttered. "At least she is useful for something. Bring the dress inside, Zara. Take it to Tiana's dressing room. And wash your hands first. We do not want grease stains on the lace." I hauled the heavy bag up the stairs, my anger simmering low and hot. They took it. They just took it. No hesitation, no shame. They felt entitled to my money even while they spit on me. I hung the dress on the custom rack in the center of the closet that used to be my room. It hung there like a ghost, a white specter of their greed. I walked back downstairs. The house was buzzing with activity. Caterers were setting up for the gala. Florists were carrying in massive arrangements of white hydrangeas. It was a scene of opulence, all built on a foundation of lies. I needed to get out. I needed air. I walked toward the back patio, intending to slip away to my car for a moment of peace. But as I passed the library, I heard voices. Raised voices. It was Brad. And he was not alone. "I told you I do not have it." Brad was shouting, though he was trying to keep his voice down. "The line of credit is frozen, Tiana. My dad said the bank put a hold on everything this morning. Some investment firm bought the debt and locked us out." I froze. That was me. I was the investment firm. Tiana's voice answered shrill and panicked. "What do you mean locked out?" "The party is tonight, Brad. The vendors need checks. My parents cannot cover this. They are leveraging the house just to pay for the bar tab." "Figure it out," Brad hissed. "Use your own money. You said you had a trust fund or something." "I do not have access to it yet," Tiana cried. "Not until I am 25, or until Zara is out of the picture legally." I pressed my back against the wall. There it was, the confirmation. "Well, get her out of the picture," Brad snarled. "Make her leave, make her disappear. I do not care what you do, just fix it. Because if this wedding does not happen, my dad goes to jail for tax fraud, and I go down with him. We need your parents' assets to cover the hole." I smiled. It was a Shark Tank, and they were eating each other. I walked away from the door, my footsteps silent on the rug. I had heard enough. I went to the kitchen and grabbed a bottle of champagne from the chilling bucket. A waiter tried to stop me. "Hey, that is for the guests," he said. I looked him in the eye. "I bought this champagne," I said. "And I am celebrating a funeral." I walked out the back door and sat on the edge of the empty fountain. I took a sip straight from the bottle. The dress was paid for. The debt was bought. The desperation was setting in. Tonight was the gala. Tonight I would wear black. And tonight I would bury them all. The sales associate, a woman with immaculate eyeliner and a practiced sneer, looked at Tiana with professional pity. "I am sorry, Miss Jenkins," she said, her voice echoing in the silent boutique. "The card was declined. Do you have another form of payment?" Tiana turned a shade of red that clashed horribly with the ivory gowns surrounding us. She dug frantically through her designer purse, pulling out 2 other platinum cards. Both declined. The machine beeped its rejection loud enough for the other shoppers to hear. "This is ridiculous," Tiana hissed, slamming her hand on the glass counter. "My fiancé is Brad Sterling. We have a line of credit here. Call the bank. It must be a mistake." The associate sighed, her patience wearing thin. "There is no mistake, ma'am. The account has been frozen. Perhaps you should call your bank." Tiana spun around, her eyes wild. She locked onto me, standing by the door. "You, give me your card." I raised an eyebrow. "My card. The one you said smells like poverty. The one you told me not to embarrass you with." "Just give it to me," she snapped, extending a demanding hand. "I will pay you back when the bank fixes the glitch. Unless you want to explain to Mom why I do not have a dress for the gala tonight." I sighed, reaching into the back pocket of my faded jeans. I pulled out my heavy titanium black card. To the untrained eye, it looked like junk. I had covered the distinctive matte black finish and the Centurion logo with a peeling, ridiculous sticker of a cartoon cat I found in a cereal box. It looked like a child's library card. I walked over and handed it to the associate. She took it gingerly, looking at the cartoon sticker with distaste. She swiped it, expecting another decline. The machine did not just beep. It chimed a cheerful, melodic sound. A notification flashed on her screen in bold green letters. "Authorized. Priority Client ZJ Holdings Corporate Account." The associate's eyes widened. She looked at the screen, then at the card, and finally at me. The color drained from her face as she realized who was standing in front of her. She started to come around the counter, her posture shifting instantly from haughty to subservient. "Ms. Jenk," she started, ready to bow. I caught her eye and pressed a single finger to my lips. I shook my head slightly. She froze. She understood. In this town, money talked, but real power whispered. She swallowed hard and nodded imperceptibly. "The transaction is approved," she said, her voice shaking slightly as she handed the card back to me with 2 hands, treating it like a sacred relic. Tiana snatched the garment bag from the counter, oblivious to the terror in the salesgirl's eyes. "See," she sneered, throwing her hair over her shoulder. "Even your trashy little debit card works eventually. You probably drained your entire life savings for this. Do not expect a tip and do not think this makes us even." She stormed out of the boutique, the heavy bag hitting me in the shoulder as she passed. I stayed behind for a second. The associate looked at me, terrified I would have her fired for the earlier rudeness. "Shall I put the receipt in a separate envelope, ma'am?" she whispered. "No," I said, pocketing the card. "Keep it on file. I have a feeling I am going to need to return this merchandise very soon." Back at the estate, I carried the garment bag upstairs and laid it on Tiana's bed. The house was chaotic with last-minute preparations for the gala. I went downstairs to the kitchen to get a glass of water. On the marble island, amidst a pile of unopened mail, sat a thick envelope with the university seal. It had been ripped open and then carelessly abandoned. I glanced at the letterhead. It was from the office of the dean. My eyes scanned the text. "Dear Ms. Jenkins, we regret to inform you that due to your cumulative GPA of 1.2 and failure to meet the minimum academic requirements for 3 consecutive semesters, you are hereby academically dismissed from the Juris Doctor program effective immediately. Furthermore, your degree will not be conferred." I let out a sharp breath. She did not graduate. The gala was a sham. The degree was a lie. Tiana was not a lawyer. She was a dropout, just like they accused me of being. Suddenly, Tiana snatched the paper from the counter. Her nails dug into the paper as she crumpled it into a ball. "You really have no respect for privacy, do you, Zara?" She hissed, her eyes darting toward the hallway to ensure our parents were not around. I leaned against the counter, crossing my arms. 1.2 GPA, Tiana. That takes effort. You have to actively try to fail that hard. Does Mom know you are celebrating a graduation that is not happening? Tiana glared at me. It does not matter. Brad does not care about the degree. He cares about the connections. Once I am a Sterling, nobody is going to ask to see my transcript. Just then, Bernice and Marcus walked into the kitchen beaming. "There is our star," Bernice cooed, clapping her hands. "We just got off the phone with Auntie May. She is so jealous that you are going to be working at the biggest firm in the city." Tiana shoved the crumpled rejection letter into her pocket and put on a bright fake smile. "Actually, Mom, that letter was the official offer. They want me to start next Monday. Starting salary is 200,000 plus bonuses." Marcus nearly dropped his coffee mug. 200,000, he shouted gleefully, pounding the table. "That is my girl. Beauty and brains. I told you, Bernice. The light skin gene carries the intellect." Bernice hugged Tiana, looking at me with pure contempt. "Did you hear that, Zara? Your sister is a high-powered attorney. Maybe if you ask nicely, she will let you empty the trash cans in her corner office." I watched them celebrate a fantasy. They were dancing on the deck of the Titanic. "That is amazing, Tiana," I said, my voice dry. "I am sure the ZJ Scholarship Fund will be thrilled to hear about your success. They usually audit recipients after graduation." Tiana waved her hand dismissively. "Oh, please. That stupid charity just sends checks. They do not care. I spent that money on handbags and nobody noticed." I smiled. I pulled out my phone under the table and sent a text to Julian. "Audit Tiana Jenkins. Revoke the ZJ grant immediately. Mark it as fraud." I looked up at my family. Enjoy the celebration, I thought. Because Monday morning is going to be a very rude awakening. The afternoon sun beat down on the limestone patio as I scrubbed a stubborn stain off a lounge chair. My mother had insisted the outdoor furniture look pristine for the cocktail hour. While I worked, Tiana and Brad lounged by the empty pool, treating me like invisible furniture. Brad was pacing his phone pressed to his ear. I stood right there, Tiana. The card was declined for the ice sculpture. My dad is freaking out. He says the liquidity transfer is stuck. We need cash to pay the valet service or they are walking. Tiana laughed, taking a sip of her iced tea. "Relax, Brad. You are so high-strung. I will cover the valets. I still have about 10 grand left on my ZJ card." I froze, my hand hovering over the scrubbing brush. The ZJ card. That was the debit card issued to recipients of the Zara Jenkins Opportunity Grant. It was intended for tuition books and housing for underprivileged students. Brad stopped pacing. "You can use that for a party. I thought that was for school stuff, like bar exams and legal fees." Tiana rolled her eyes, setting her glass down on the table I had just cleaned. "Oh, please. It is a slush fund. I have not bought a textbook in 4 years. That scholarship is the biggest joke in the world. Some anonymous donor just dumps money into the account every semester. They never check the receipts." She leaned back, kicking her feet up. "Last spring break in Miami. That was all ZJ money. The bottle service at the club, the yacht rental. My entire wardrobe for this week, all paid for by some faceless idiot with a savior complex. I swear whoever runs that fund must be brain dead to keep sending checks to a student with my grades." I felt a cold smile spread across my face. Brain dead. Faceless idiot. She was talking about me. I had set up that fund to help students like I used to be, students who needed a break. Instead, I had been funding my bully's lifestyle. I slowly reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. I opened the voice memo app and hit record. Say that again, I said under my breath. And you are sure they won't audit you? Brad asked, looking relieved but still nervous. Never. Tiana scoffed. I forged the expense reports perfectly. I listed the Chanel bag as legal briefcases and the bar tab as networking events. It is free money, babe. We are going to use the rest of it for the honeymoon. Gotcha. I stopped the recording and saved the file. I named it Evidence Exhibit A. Then I opened my secure messaging app and typed a message to my lead counsel in New York. It is Zara. I have audio confirmation of grand larceny and fraud regarding the ZJ grant funds. The recipient admitted to forging expense reports and using funds for luxury goods. Draft a lawsuit immediately. I want a freeze on the assets and a repayment demand for the full 4 years, plus interest. And prepare a criminal referral for the district attorney. I hit send. I picked up my scrub brush and looked at Tiana. She was laughing at something Brad said, completely unaware that she had just confessed to a felony in front of the victim. Enjoy the honeymoon phase, Tiana, I thought. Because you are about to trade that 5-star resort for a federal indictment. The faceless idiot just woke up. And she wants her change. I was carrying a stack of freshly pressed linens down the second-floor hallway when a hand shot out and grabbed my arm. It was Brad. He was leaning against the doorframe of the guest suite, his tie loosened and his eyes glassy with midday bourbon. He looked me up and down, a predatory grin spreading across his flushed face. In a hurry, Zara, he slurred, stepping into my path and blocking the way. You have been running around all day. You look sweaty. I like that. It is earthy. I tried to step around him, but he mirrored my movement, pinning me against the floral wallpaper. Excuse me, Brad, I said, keeping my voice flat. I have work to do. Tiana needs these towels. Forget Tiana, he whispered, leaning in close enough that I could smell the stale alcohol on his breath. Tiana is busy playing princess. She is perfect on paper, sure. Light skin, straight hair, the trophy wife my dad wants me to have. But between you and me, she is a little boring. A little too vanilla. He reached out and touched a curl of my hair. I flinched, but I did not pull away. I needed him to keep talking. I have always had a thing for the wild ones. He continued, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial murmur. The ones who come from the struggle. You have got that look in your eyes, Zara. Like you are hungry. I could help you with that. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a wad of cash. It was mostly 1s and 5s. The pathetic bankroll of a man pretending to be rich. How about we make a deal? He said, pressing the money against my hip. You be my little secret on the side. You keep me entertained when Tiana gets too annoying, and I will make sure you have enough cash for whatever it is you people buy. Cigarettes, malt liquor, rent. The racism was casual, wrapped in a proposition that made my skin crawl. He thought he was doing me a favor. He thought he was purchasing a body he deemed lesser than his own. I slowly reached up to my collar. I was not fixing my shirt. I was pressing the tiny activation stud on the high-definition camera lens, disguised as the top black button of my blouse. A faint vibration against my collarbone told me it was recording. Are you sure about this, Brad? I asked, feigning hesitation. Your fiancé is right next door fitting her veil. She thinks you are the perfect gentleman. She thinks you adore her. Brad threw his head back and laughed. It was a cruel barking sound. Adore her. Please. Tiana is an investment. She is a cash cow. Once we get married and I get access to your parents' assets to cover my overhead, she can spend her time shopping for all I care. I will not have to look at her plastic face anymore. But you are the fun. You are the flavor. He leaned in, trying to kiss my neck. So what do you say, Zara? Do you want to make some real money? I shoved him back hard enough that he stumbled and hit the opposite wall. I say you should save those 1s and 5s, Brad, I said, my voice ice cold. You are going to need them for the commissary. He looked confused, blinking at me stupidly. What? I walked past him, the camera still recording his stunned, pathetic expression. Nothing, I said over my shoulder. Just giving you some financial advice. I turned the corner and stopped, exhaling a breath I did not realize I had been holding. My hand went to the button on my collar. I stopped the recording. I had him. I had the sexual harassment. I had the racism. But most importantly, I had the confession. He admitted Tiana was just a cash cow. He admitted he was after the assets. I pulled out my phone and uploaded the footage to the cloud server immediately. I named the file the Sterling Character Reference. Tiana was a monster, but even monsters did not deserve to be sold like cattle. Brad Sterling had just signed his own death warrant, and I was going to make sure it was televised. The afternoon sun filtered through the sheer drapes of the sunroom, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air and the sheen of sweat on my forehead. Bernice had turned the air conditioning down to save money, a petty economy that clashed with the extravagance of the spread before us. Put this on, she had commanded earlier, throwing a garment bag at my chest. And tie that hair back. We do not want it shedding in the scones. I was wearing a black polyester dress with a starched white apron. It was a costume, a caricature of servitude that she had likely ordered online for a Halloween party and repurposed for my humiliation. It scratched my skin and smelled faintly of plastic, but I wore it. It was the perfect camouflage. The room was filled with the church ladies, the high society matrons of Buckhead's African-American elite. Mrs. Gable, the deacon's wife, wore a hat so large it practically had its own zip code. Mrs. Vance, the treasurer of the Charity League, was dripping in pearls. They sat on my parents' floral sofas, fanning themselves and gossiping about people who were not fortunate enough to be in the room. "Refreshments, ladies," Bernice announced, clapping her hands. "The girl is bringing them out now." I walked in, balancing a heavy silver tray laden with porcelain teacups and a steaming pot of Earl Grey. I kept my eyes lowered, playing the part. I moved around the circle, pouring the amber liquid with the precision of a surgeon. Mrs. Gable took a sip and paused, her eyebrows shooting up toward the brim of her hat. "My goodness, Bernice, this is exquisite. The temperature is perfect, and the steep is just right." She turned her gaze to me, a look of genuine surprise on her face. "You have a gift, child. Most of the girls the agency sends over spill half of it in the saucer. You move with such grace. Have you been trained professionally?" I opened my mouth to speak, perhaps to mention that I had spent 3 years studying tea ceremonies in Kyoto while researching architectural minimalism, but Bernice cut me off with a sharp, barking laugh. "Oh, Gladys, please," she scoffed, waving a dismissive hand in my direction. "Do not put ideas in her head. Zara is not trained. She is just instinctual." She leaned in, lowering her voice to a stage whisper that everyone could hear. "It is in the blood, really. Some people are born to lead, and some are born to serve. Look at her. She has those sturdy peasant hands. She is built for labor, not leisure. If you compliment her too much, she will start thinking she deserves a seat at the table instead of waiting on it." A few of the ladies tittered nervously, glancing at me with a mixture of pity and discomfort. "She is my little charity project," Bernice continued, emboldened by the reaction. "We tried to educate her, but books just confused her. She is much happier here holding a tray. It keeps her humble. And Lord knows she needs the humility." I gripped the handle of the silver teapot. It was scalding hot. I imagined for just a second, letting it slip. I imagined the hot tea soaking into Bernice's expensive rug, the screams, the chaos. But that was what the old Zara would do. The new Zara played the long game. "More sugar, Mrs. Vance?" I asked, my voice smooth and devoid of emotion. "Why, yes, thank you," she said, avoiding my eyes. I placed 2 cubes into her cup with silver tongs. "You are doing a fine job," Bernice said, snapping her fingers at me. "Now go check on the cucumber sandwiches, and take the trash out while you are back there. You smell like the outdoors." I bowed my head slightly. "Yes, Mom." I backed out of the room, fading into the shadows of the hallway. As the door clicked shut, I heard Mrs. Gable speak again. She really is quite striking, Bernice. In a raw sort of way. She is a mule, Bernice spat. A useful mule, but a mule nonetheless. Now tell me about the gala. I want everything to be perfect for Tiana. I walked into the kitchen and set the tray down on the counter. I pulled out my phone. I opened the file labeled Asset Seizure. I scrolled down to the inventory list for the house. Antique silver tea service. Appraised value $12,000. I checked the box next to it. Keep talking, Mother, I whispered to the empty kitchen. Every insult just adds another item to the repo list. I hope you enjoyed the tea. It cost you your silver. The house had finally quieted down after the tea party, but the tension remained thick in the air like humidity before a storm. I was on my way to the basement to charge my laptop when I heard a voice coming from the study. The door was cracked open just an inch, spilling a sliver of yellow light onto the hallway floor. It was my father, Marcus. Please, Mr. Henderson, he was saying, his voice trembling with a desperation I had never heard before. I just need the $50,000 by tomorrow morning. The caterers are demanding a certified check, or they will not unlock the kitchen doors. I pressed myself against the wall, merging with the shadows. $50,000. They were scrambling for 50 grand while I had just transferred 5 million to buy their neighbor's debt. I understand the terms are aggressive. Marcus continued, wiping sweat from his brow with a shaking hand. 25% interest is... It is high. But I have no choice. Yes. Yes, I authorize it. Use the house as collateral. It is the last unencumbered asset we have. Just get me the cash. I felt a cold knot form in my stomach. He was gambling the roof over his head for a party. He was leveraging his future to pay for lobster tails and ice sculptures, for a daughter who lied about her degree, and a son-in-law who was already bankrupt. It was financial suicide. I thank you, Marcus said, sounding defeated. I will sign the digital promissory note now. Just please keep this discreet. My wife, she cannot know we are this close to the edge. He hung up the phone and slumped forward, burying his head in his hands. I watched him for a moment. A weak man making weak decisions. He was not protecting his family. He was burying them to save face. I backed away silently, retreating to the kitchen. I did not feel pity. Pity was for people who were victims of circumstance. Marcus was a victim of his own vanity. I pulled out my secure phone and dialed the direct line to my private banker at Goldman Sachs. It is Zara, I said as soon as he picked up. I need you to execute a purchase order immediately. Whatever you need, Ms. Jenkins, the banker replied. There is a high-risk lender in Atlanta called Henderson Financing, I said, keeping my voice low. They are about to issue a secured loan to Marcus Jenkins for $50,000, collateralized by a residential property on West Paces Ferry. I see it in the system pending approval, the banker said. Buy the note, I commanded. Buy the entire debt portfolio if you have to. But I want that specific loan assigned to ZJ Holdings. I want to be the lien holder on that house before the ink is dry. Are you sure, the banker asked? That is a toxic asset. It is not an asset, I said, looking down the hall toward the study where my father was signing his life away. It is a leash. And I'm about to yank it, buy it, and set the repayment terms to immediate call upon default. Done, the banker said. You own the debt, Ms. Jenkins. I hung up the phone. I walked over to the refrigerator and poured myself a glass of tap water. My father thought he had just bought himself a lifeline. He had no idea he had just sold his house to the daughter he forced to sleep in the basement. The wedding was going to happen. The champagne would flow. But when the music stopped, Marcus Jenkins was going to realize that his new landlord did not accept apologies as payment. The next morning, I decided to accelerate the timeline. Tiana needed to feel invincible before I cut her legs out from under her. I sat in the library at my father's desk and drafted a letter on my laptop. I used the letterhead of a fictitious law firm in Switzerland. The document detailed a surprise inheritance from a distant great-aunt on my father's side, a woman who never actually existed. The letter stated that a trust fund worth $5 million was maturing on the day of the gala and would be released solely to Tiana Jenkins upon proof of her marriage to a sterling. I printed the letter on heavy cream-colored paper and left it slightly protruding from a stack of unpaid bills on the kitchen counter. Then I retreated to the pantry and waited. It took Tiana exactly 11 minutes to find it. I watched through the crack in the door as she sifted through the mail looking for credit card offers. She froze when she saw the Swiss letterhead. Her eyes scanned the page, widening with every line. She gasped a sound of pure, unadulterated greed. "Mom," she screamed, running out of the kitchen, the letter clutched in her hand like a winning lottery ticket. "Mom, you are not going to believe this. We are rich. I am rich." I stepped out of the pantry and walked over to the counter where she had been standing. She was so excited she had left her phone unlocked on the marble surface. I quickly opened her banking app. She had already initiated a transfer request for $50,000 from a high-interest payday lender using the non-existent trust fund as collateral proof. I took a screenshot of the fraudulent loan application and sent it to my cloud drive. Receipt number 1. Attempted bank fraud using forged documents. Tiana was not just spending money she did not have, she was now borrowing against a ghost. Later that afternoon, I was polishing the banister on the second-floor landing when Brad came out of the guest suite. He was on his phone, his back to me. He did not hear my rag moving silently over the wood. "Yeah, Dad." "I know she is emphatic," Brad said into the phone, his voice dripping with condescension. "But you have to look at the long game. The Jenkins family is desperate for validation. They want to breed up. You know how these new money black families are? They think marrying a sterling washes the dirt off their money." I stopped polishing. My blood ran cold. This was not just about money. This was about eugenics. This was about a white family thinking they were doing us a favor by diluting our bloodline. Brad laughed a nasty, guttural sound. "Exactly. Tiana is fine for photos, but let us be real. I am doing her a favor. Once we get the deed to the house and pay off the construction loans, I will put her in a condo somewhere and live my life. She is just the ticket to the buffet." I slowly reached into my cleaning bucket and pulled out my phone. I hit record just as he turned around. "Oh, you are there," he said, not even startled. "Good. My shoes need a shine before the rehearsal. Get to it." I stood up, holding the phone at my side. "You really despise us, don't you, Brad?" He smirked. "I despise poverty, Zara. And despite this big house, I can smell the poverty on you people. It is in the walls. I am just the exterminator." He walked past me, heading downstairs to drink my father's liquor. I saved the recording. Receipt number 2. Hate speech and conspiracy to commit fraud. The exterminator was about to get fumigated. An hour later, I found my mother in the sunroom having tea with Linda Sterling. They were thick as thieves, now bonded by the delusion that they were both wealthy matriarchs. I was instructed to water the ferns in the corner, rendering me invisible to them. Bernice leaned in close to Linda, lowering her voice. "I am just so relieved Tiana found Brad," my mother whispered. "You know how hard it is to find a quality man in Atlanta, especially one with your background." Linda raised an eyebrow. "My background?" "You know," Bernice said, gesturing vaguely. "European? Cultured." "Between you and me, Linda, I have always prayed Tiana would marry out. I did not want her stuck with someone urban. We have worked too hard to elevate this family to let it slide back into the ghetto." Linda nodded, sipping her tea. "I understand completely, Bernice. We have to protect the lineage." "It is so exhausting," Bernice sighed. "Keeping up appearances, but once the wedding is done, we can relax. I am hoping Brad can help Marcus with his investments. Marcus is a bit too trusting with his own people. He needs a firm white hand to guide the portfolio." I sprayed the ferns so hard a leaf snapped off. My mother was not just a victim of colorism. She was a perpetrator. She was actively selling out her own culture, her own husband for a slice of white approval that did not even exist. I pulled my phone out from my apron pocket. The voice memo app had caught every word. Receipt number 3. Bernice Jenkins admitting to racial self-hatred and conspiring to hand over family control to a con artist. The house was buzzing with activity as the caterers for the gala began to arrive. I was directed to the back entrance to help unload the truck. As I carried crates of champagne, I saw my father Marcus standing by the garage talking to a man I recognized. It was Mr. Henderson, the loan shark. "I thought we had a deal," Marcus was saying, his voice trembling. "You said the money would be here by noon." "It is here," Henderson said, leaning against his black sedan. "But the terms have changed. My investor wants a personal guarantee. He wants your signature on a confession of judgment. If you miss one payment, we take the house, the cars, and your pension. No court, no delay. Immediate seizure." Marcus wiped sweat from his upper lip. "That is suicide. If the wedding gifts do not cover the first month." "Then you are on the street," Marcus Henderson said. "Sign the paper or I take the cash back." I hid behind a stack of crates and zoomed in with my camera. I snapped a photo of the document Marcus was holding. It was a predatory loan agreement, illegal in the state of Georgia due to its usurious interest rate. Marcus signed it. He handed the paper back and took the briefcase of cash. He looked like a man walking to the gallows. I waited until Henderson drove away. Then I texted the photo to my lawyer. Receipt number 4. Marcus Jenkins entering into an illegal loan agreement. I just bought his debt from a criminal. Now I owned him legally and ethically. Tiana found me in the laundry room an hour later. She was holding a stack of RSVP cards. "Here," she said, throwing them at my head. "Sort these. The seating chart is a mess. I need the wealthy guests at the front and the charity cases in the back. And put yourself at table 99. That is the one by the kitchen door." I picked up the cards. "Tiana," I said, keeping my voice mild. "I saw an email on Dad's computer earlier. Something about the mortgage being past due. Are you sure we can afford this party?" Tiana laughed, checking her makeup in the reflection of the washing machine. "You worry too much, Zara. That is why you have wrinkles. Dad has it handled, and besides, I just got approved for a massive credit line increase." "Really?" I asked. "Which bank?" "Some offshore thing Brad set up for me," she said breezily. "He said all I had to do was sign a power of attorney granting him access to my future assets. It is standard for high-net-worth couples." Power of attorney. She had given a bankrupt con man legal control over her finances. "Did you read the fine print, Tiana?" "I do not read fine print," she scoffed. "That is what assistants are for." "Speaking of which, hurry up with those cards. I have a massage in 20 minutes. She flounced out. I looked at the RSVP cards in my hand. I pulled out my phone and called my forensic accountant. "Check for any new power of attorney filings under Tiana Jenkins' name," I said. "Brad Sterling just tricked her into signing over her life rights." I got the confirmation 10 minutes later. The document was filed electronically. Brad now had the legal right to take out loans in Tiana's name. Receipt number 5. Tiana Jenkins proving she is the architect of her own destruction. Dinner that night was a chaotic affair. The family ate standing up in the kitchen while the staff prepped the dining room for the next day. I was eating a sandwich over the sink when Linda Sterling walked in. She looked around to make sure she was alone, then opened the silverware drawer. She quickly grabbed a handful of sterling silver serving spoons and shoved them into her oversized handbag. I stopped chewing. She was stealing the silverware. The woman who claimed to have a robust trust fund was petty thieving forks and spoons. She turned and saw me. She froze. "I was just checking the polish," she stammered. "They looked a bit tarnished. I was going to take them to my room to shine them up. A favor for Bernice." I swallowed my bite of sandwich. "That is very kind of you, Mrs. Sterling," I said. "But you might want to be careful. Those spoons are distinctive. It would be a shame if they set off the metal detectors at the pawn shop." Her eyes narrowed. "You listen to me, you little street rat. You say a word and I will have you arrested for theft. Who are they going to believe? The mother of the groom or the charity case sleeping in the basement?" She marched out, the spoons clinking in her bag. I pulled up the security camera feed on my phone. I had installed hidden cameras in the kitchen the moment I arrived. The entire interaction was recorded in 4K resolution. Receipt number 6. Linda Sterling committing petty larceny. The night before the gala, the house finally fell silent. I sat on my cot in the basement, the glow of my laptop illuminating the damp walls. I had them. I had them all. I had Tiana on bank fraud, Brad on hate speech and conspiracy, Bernice on record hating her own race, Marcus signing illegal loans, and Linda stealing silverware. I organized the files into a presentation. I synced it to the main audio-visual system of the St. Regis Hotel ballroom where the gala was being held. I had hacked their system 2 hours ago. Tomorrow, when Tiana went to the podium to give her speech about love and success, the screens behind her were not going to show a slideshow of her childhood. They were going to show the receipts. I closed the laptop. The escalation was over. The trap was full. I lay back on the cot and closed my eyes. They wanted a show. They wanted a spectacle. I was going to give them the greatest finale Atlanta had ever seen. Sleep came easily. It was the sleep of the righteous, the sleep of the executioner the night before the hanging. The St. Regis Hotel in Buckhead was a fortress of marble and gold leaf. The chandeliers in the grand ballroom were the size of small cars. My mother had leveraged the last of the family's credit to rent this space, desperate to prove to Atlanta that the Jenkins family had finally arrived. I walked into the lobby wearing the severe black suit my mother had left on my cot. It was 2 sizes too big, designed to swallow my figure and make me look shapeless. I had pinned it back with safety pins hidden underneath the fabric, tailoring it into something sharp and dangerous. Bernice was waiting by the double doors of the ballroom. She was frantic, barking orders at the florists. When she saw me, her eyes narrowed. "You are late," she snapped, grabbing my arm and pulling me into the shadows of a large potted palm. "And look at you. Even in a suit, you managed to look like you just walked off a construction site." I smoothed the lapel of the jacket. "I am here to work, Mother. Where do you want me?" She pointed a manicured finger at a small podium set up just outside the main doors. "Right there. You are the gatekeeper. You check every invitation. You take every coat. And most importantly, you do not under any circumstances step foot inside the main ballroom." I looked through the open doors at the tables draped in white satin and the stage set for Tiana's triumph. "Why not?" "Because you ruin the aesthetic," she hissed, her face inches from mine. "Look at this room, Zara. It is light. It is airy. It is sophisticated. You are heavy. You are dark. You are a visual blemish. If the photographer captures you in the background of Tiana's speech, it will ruin the entire mood. You are bad feng shui." I stared at her. She was not just hiding me, she was erasing me. She wanted my labor, but she could not stomach my existence. "Fine," I said, stepping behind the podium. "I will stay out here. I will make sure only the right people get in." "Good," she said, smoothing her hair. "And if the Sterlings arrive, radio me immediately. I want to greet them personally. Do not speak to them. Do not look at them. Just take their coats and disappear." She turned and marched into the light, leaving me in the hallway. I looked down at the guest list on the podium. It was a roster of Atlanta's elite, politicians, business owners, socialites. I pulled a gold pen from my pocket. It was not the cheap plastic one provided by the hotel. It was my own. I scanned the list. I saw the names I was looking for. Dr. Gregory Holloway, Dean of the Law School, Darius Vance, CEO of Vance Tech. They were not on the original list my mother had given the planner. I had added them myself when I hacked the event portal. I stood up straighter. My mother wanted me to be the gatekeeper. She had no idea she had just handed the keys to the castle to the enemy. The first guests began to arrive. I smiled. I took their coats. I checked their names. I played the part of the silent, invisible servant perfectly. But every time the doors swung open, I caught a glimpse of the massive LED screens flanking the stage. They were currently displaying a loop of Tiana's engagement photos. In less than 2 hours, those screens would be displaying her criminal record. I checked my watch. The countdown had begun. The revolving doors of the St. Regis lobby spun, admitting a steady stream of sequins and tuxedos. I stood behind the podium checking names off the list with my gold pen. Most of the guests were local socialites, people who leveraged their credit cards to maintain their country club memberships. They barely glanced at me as they tossed their wraps and jackets onto the counter, treating me with the same indifference they showed the furniture. Then the atmosphere in the lobby shifted. The air grew heavier, charged with the static of real power. A group of 6 individuals walked in. They did not look around at the decor. They walked with the singular focus of people who owned the building, not just rented the room. It was the executive board of the Atlanta Urban Redevelopment Council. And walking point was Marcus Thorne, a real estate mogul, whose net worth made the Sterlings look like they were living on minimum wage. He approached the podium, his eyes scanning the room for the host. When his gaze landed on me, he stopped. He blinked. He took off his glasses and cleaned them, then looked again. "Chairman Jenkins," he said, his voice low and incredulous. I put a finger to my lips immediately. "Not tonight, Marcus." He looked at my ill-fitting suit. He looked at the coat check tickets in my hand. He looked at the sign that said, "Coat check." "Zara," he whispered, leaning in. "Is this a hostile takeover? Are we buying the hotel? Why are you dressed like staff?" I smiled. "I am undercover Marcus. This is my family. They think I am destitute. They think I am the help. I need you to play along." He stared at me for a second, and then a slow, knowing grin spread across his face. He understood. He knew I operated in the shadows. "You are terrifying," he murmured. "Just enjoy the party," I said, "and wait for the presentation. I think you will find the financials illuminating." He laughed softly. "I look forward to it." Just then my mother swooped in. She had spotted the expensive suits from across the hall. "Mr. Thorne," she squealed, pushing me aside with her hip. "I am so honored you could make it. I apologize if this girl is bothering you. She is a charity case we took in. She is a little slow." Marcus Thorne looked at Bernice. His face went blank. He looked at me, then back at her. "She is doing an excellent job, Mrs. Jenkins," he said, his voice ice cold. "I find her to be incredibly resourceful." Bernice preened, missing the subtext entirely. "Oh, you are too kind. Please come in. Tiana is dying to meet you. She is going to be a top lawyer, you know." Thorne glanced at me one last time. He gave a barely perceptible nod. "I will be sure to say hello," he said. He walked into the ballroom, followed by his entourage. Bernice glared at me. "Do not speak to the VIPs, Zara," she hissed. "You are here to take coats, not network. You are embarrassing me." I held out my hand for the next ticket. "I am just doing my job, Mother." She huffed and stormed off. I watched her go. She had just insulted the man who held the zoning rights to every property she aspired to own. She was insulting the gods in her own temple. The lobby was emptying out. The stragglers were hurrying inside. I checked my watch. The speeches were about to start. I looked at the guest list. There was one name left unchecked: Darius. As if summoned, the sound of a helicopter rotor cut through the ambient noise of the hotel. I looked out the glass doors. A sleek black chopper was descending onto the hotel's private helipad. The final piece was here. It was time to leave the podium. It was time to enter the arena. The double doors to the ballroom cracked open just enough for me to slip inside the shadows of the tech booth. I had relieved the audio technician 5 minutes ago with a crisp $100 bill and a lie about checking the microphone levels for my mother. From my vantage point, I had a perfect view of the stage. Tiana stood in the center of the spotlight, clutching the microphone like it was an award. She looked undeniably beautiful, a vision in white lace and diamonds, but I knew the rot beneath the silk. "Thank you all for coming," Tiana gushed, forcing a tear to sparkle in her eye. Getting to this moment was not easy. Law school tested every fiber of my being. There were nights I wanted to quit. Nights I sat in the library until sunrise reading case law until my eyes burned. But I knew I had a legacy to uphold. I snorted softly. The only thing she read until sunrise was her credit card statement. I could not have done it without the support of the ZJ Opportunity Grant. Tiana continued, placing a hand over her heart. That scholarship saw potential in me when I was struggling. They recognized that true excellence requires investment. I stand here today as proof that hard work pays off. The crowd applauded politely. My mother dabbed her eyes in the front row. It was a masterclass in fiction. Then Brad stepped up, taking the microphone from her, with the easy entitlement of a man who assumes everyone wants to hear him speak. He wrapped an arm around Tiana's waist, pulling her close in a display of possessive affection. "Is she not amazing?" Brad boomed, flashing his white teeth. "A real lawyer. A professional. You know, when I first met the Jenkins family, I saw diamonds in the rough. I saw a family that just needed a little guidance, a little sterling touch to really shine." A ripple of uncomfortable silence moved through the room. The racial undertone was subtle but sharp. He was calling them projects. "But we are so proud of Tiana," Brad went on, oblivious. "She is the example of what happens when you apply yourself. Unlike other members of this family." He paused for dramatic effect, looking out into the darkness of the room. "We all know Tiana's sister Zara could not be here tonight," Brad said, his voice dropping to a mock sympathetic tone. "Or rather, she is here, but she is working the door. Because sadly, not everyone has the drive to succeed. Zara chose the easy path. She dropped out. She gave up. And now she serves those who persevered." Tiana leaned into the mic. "It is tragic, really, but it serves as a reminder to us all. You can either be the queen on the stage, or you can be the help in the hallway. I chose the stage." The room erupted in applause. My mother nodded vigorously, validating the humiliation of her own child to elevate the other. I looked down at the mixing board in front of me. My finger hovered over the input button for the main screen. "You chose the stage, Tiana," I whispered. "But you forgot one thing. I own the theater, and I am about to bring the curtain down." The applause for Brad's speech was still echoing when the ballroom doors swung open with a force that commanded attention. Dr. Gregory Holloway strode in. He was a giant in the academic world, the dean of the law school, and a man whose approval my mother would kill to obtain. He wore a tuxedo that fit him perfectly and carried a leather portfolio stamped with the university seal. Bernice gasped. She smoothed her emerald dress and practically sprinted across the room, leaving her high society friends mid-sentence. She reached Holloway before he could take 3 steps into the foyer. "Dr. Holloway," she exclaimed, her voice pitching high with excitement. "What an honor! You came to congratulate Tiana personally. I told everyone you favor her. She is your star pupil after all. Please come to the stage." She is just finishing her speech. She tried to grab his arm to steer him toward the podium where Tiana and Brad stood beaming. Holloway looked at her hand on his sleeve with mild distaste. He gently but firmly removed it. "Excuse me, madam," he said, his voice projecting authority. "I am not here for Tiana Jenkins. In fact, I am quite surprised she is hosting a gala, considering the disciplinary hearing regarding her expulsion is scheduled for Monday morning." Bernice froze. Her smile twitched. Expulsion. Before she could ask what he meant, he walked past her. He walked past the stunned guests. He walked past Brad and Tiana on the stage, who looked like deer caught in headlights. He headed straight for the back of the room where I was standing in the shadows of the tech booth doorway, still wearing my ill-fitting black suit. The room turned to watch. The silence was heavy. Why was the dean walking toward the coat-check girl? Why was he ignoring the guest of honor? Holloway stopped in front of me. He looked at my cheap suit. He looked at the headset around my neck. He looked at the tray of dirty glasses on the table next to me. His expression shifted from confusion to outrage. "Madam Chairman," he said loud enough for the first 3 rows to hear. "Why are you standing in the dark wearing a service uniform? The Board of Trustees has been waiting in the VIP suite for 20 minutes. We cannot cut the ribbon on the new Zara Jenkins legal library without the lead donor present. I saw my mother's knees buckle. She grabbed the back of a chair to stay upright. On stage, Tiana dropped the microphone. It hit the floor with a deafening screech of feedback that made everyone wince. I took off the headset and tossed it onto the table. It clattered against the glass. "I am sorry, Dr. Holloway," I said, smoothing my lapel and stepping into the light. I got held up. It seems my family had some trouble locating the staff, so I had to step in. But I am ready now. Holloway offered me his arm, treating me with a reverence that made the Sterlings gasp. "Shall we go, Ms. Jenkins? The press is waiting for your statement." I took his arm. We walked past my mother, who looked like she was having a stroke. I did not look down. I looked straight ahead at the stage where my sister was trembling. The intermission was over. The main event had just arrived. "Oh, Dr. Holloway." Bernice let out a shrill, hysterical laugh that echoed off the vaulted ceiling. She physically threw herself between us, her hand clutching the doctor's sleeve with desperate strength. "You are clearly confused. The lighting in here is terrible. This is not a chairman. This is Zara. She is the cleaning girl. She scrubs the toilets. Tiana is the star. Tiana is the one you are here to honor." She gestured wildly toward the stage where Tiana stood frozen, her face a mask of terror. "Look at her. She is the lawyer. She is the future of this family." Dr. Holloway stopped. He looked at Bernice's hand on his arm, then peeled it off as if it were a leech. He adjusted his glasses and peered over the rims at Tiana. "Tiana Jenkins," he said, his voice dry and carrying to the back of the room. "You mean the student currently suspended pending a disciplinary hearing for gross academic dishonesty? The student who submitted a final thesis entirely plagiarized from a case study published in 1998. The silence that fell over the ballroom was instant and suffocating. A glass clinked against a table, sounding like a gunshot. "Plagiarism," a woman whispered near the front. "Suspended," a man echoed his tone, incredulous. Bernice's face drained of all color, leaving her rouge standing out like clown paint. "That is impossible. She graduated with honors. We have the letter. She starts at the firm on Monday." "You have a forgery," Madam Holloway stated, his voice cutting through the denial. "Miss Jenkins has not earned a passing grade in 3 semesters. She failed her ethics exam twice." The university was preparing to press criminal charges for the fraudulent use of scholarship funds, but the primary donor intervened and asked us to handle it administratively. He turned his eyes back to me, full of respect. A donor who showed remarkable restraint, I might add. I looked at my mother, whose eyes were bulging. "Mercy is expensive, Mother," I said calmly, "and Tiana just overdrew her account." "He is lying!" Tiana shrieked from the stage, her voice cracking. "He is senile! Brad, do something! Get him out of here!" But Brad Sterling did not move to defend her. He stepped away from her as if she were contagious. He looked at Tiana with a mixture of horror and fury. "You said you were a partner." Brad hissed, the microphone catching his whisper. "You said you had a $200,000 signing bonus." "I do," Tiana sobbed, reaching for him. "I can fix this. It is just a misunderstanding." "There is no misunderstanding," Holloway declared. "And Mrs. Jenkins suggesting that the chairman of ZJ Holdings is your cleaning lady is not merely insulting. It is grounds for the university to immediately revoke your husband's bid for the campus maintenance contract." Marcus Jenkins dropped his whiskey glass. It shattered on the marble floor, the sound exploding in the quiet room. He had leveraged the last of his business assets to secure that bid. Chairman Marcus whispered, staring at me as if seeing me for the first time. "Zara." I met his gaze. "Hello, Dad. Did you think I was scrubbing floors in New York?" "I was buying the buildings." I turned to Holloway. "Shall we, Doctor? I believe I have a ribbon to cut. And I have a lot of trash to take out later." "After you," Madam Chair Holloway said. We walked past my parents, leaving them standing in the wreckage of their lies. The crowd began to murmur, a low roar of gossip and judgment. The first shockwave had hit. The second was descending from the sky. The roar of the helicopter rotors drowned out the murmurs of the crowd. The crystal glasses on the tables rattled as the sleek black chopper descended onto the great lawn just outside the open French doors. The wind whipped the tablecloths and ruined elaborate hairstyles, but no one moved. They were too busy staring at the logo emblazoned on the side of the aircraft. A stylized Z intertwined with a V. The doors opened, and 4 men in earpieces stepped out, forming a perimeter. Then Darius Vance emerged. He looked like a god of war in a tuxedo that cost more than the average American salary. He adjusted his cuffs and strode toward the ballroom entrance, his eyes hidden behind dark sunglasses, despite the evening hour. Brad Sterling lit up like a Christmas tree. He pushed past Tiana, desperate to salvage his crumbling reputation. "That is him," Brad shouted to the room, pointing a shaking finger. "That is Darius Vance, the tech mogul. He is here for me. We are discussing a merger." Watch this! Brad practically sprinted across the dance floor, his arms wide open. "Darius, my man. I knew you would make it. I was just telling everyone about our partnership." Brad reached out to grab Darius' hand, a desperate grin plastered on his face. Darius did not even slow down. He did not break stride. He simply flicked his wrist, and one of his bodyguards stepped forward, planting a massive hand on Brad's chest. Brad slammed into the wall of muscle and bounced back, stumbling over his own feet. Darius walked right past him as if Brad were a potted plant. He removed his sunglasses, scanning the room until his eyes locked on me. The stern lines of his face softened instantly. The entire room watched in paralyzed silence as the billionaire tech tycoon walked past the weeping mother of the bride, past the disgraced father, and stopped directly in front of the girl in the ill-fitting waiter's suit. He took my hand, the one still holding the service rag, and raised it to his lips. He kissed my knuckles, lingering for a moment before looking me in the eye. "I apologize for the delay. My love," Darius said, his voice deep and smooth, carrying to the back of the silent room. "I ran into a bit of paperwork." I raised an eyebrow. "You missed the speeches, Darius. They were quite entertaining." I heard he replied with a smirk. "But I think you will like my excuse. I just came from the courthouse. The foreclosure paperwork on the Sterling estate is finalized. The sheriff is putting the padlock on the gate as we speak." He pulled a thick document from his inside pocket and slapped it into Brad's chest as he walked by him. "You might want to call your mother, Brad," Darius said over his shoulder. "She is currently on the lawn screaming at the movers. I bought the debt this morning. ZJ Holdings now owns everything your father thought was his, including the shirt on your back." Brad looked at the document. He looked at Darius. Then he looked at me. His knees gave out and he sank to the floor, clutching the eviction notice like a lifeline. The second shockwave had hit, and the tsunami was just beginning. I stepped over Brad Sterling, who was currently weeping on the parquet floor, clutching the foreclosure notice. I did not look down. My eyes were fixed on the stage where Tiana stood trembling in her white dress. The room was deathly silent save for the hum of the air conditioning and Brad's pathetic sobbing. I walked up the stairs to the stage. Tiana backed away from me, her heels clicking frantically on the wood. She looked like a cornered animal. "Get away from me!" she hissed, her voice shaking. "Security! Someone get this woman off the stage!" I reached the podium and tapped the microphone. The sound echoed through the ballroom, crisp and clear. "There is no security, Tiana," I said, my voice calm. "I dismissed them 10 minutes ago. And even if they were here, they work for the owner of the building, which as of this morning is me." I looked out at the sea of faces, the elite of Atlanta, the people my mother had spent her life trying to impress. They were staring at me with rapt attention. They smelled blood in the water. My mother Bernice stood at the foot of the stairs. Her face was a mask of terror. "Zara, please," she begged, her voice barely a whisper. "Do not do this. We are family." I looked down at her. "Family. You told these people I was the help. You made me sleep in the basement. You tried to bleach my skin. We are not family, Bernice. We are co-belligerents in a war you just lost." I pulled a small remote from my pocket. I pointed it at the massive LED screen behind me, which was still displaying a frozen image of Tiana and Brad smiling falsely. I think it is time we saw the behind-the-scenes footage, I said. Roll the tape. I pressed the button. The screen flickered and then dissolved into high-definition video. It was the hallway footage from earlier that day. The audio was crystal clear, booming through the concert-quality speakers. Brad's face filled the screen. He was leaning against the doorframe looking predatory. Tiana is a cash cow, Brad's voice boomed. She is a trophy. Once I get access to your parents' assets, I will not have to look at her plastic face anymore. But you, Zara, you are the fun. You are the flavor. The crowd gasped, a collective intake of breath that sucked the oxygen out of the room. On the screen, Brad leaned in trying to kiss my neck. Everyone has a price, especially girls like you who come from nothing. I paused the video on Brad's sneering face. I looked at Tiana. She was staring at the screen, her mouth open in a silent scream. She looked down at Brad, who was still on the floor. You said you loved me, she screamed, her voice breaking. You said I was your queen. Brad did not answer. He just curled into a tighter ball. I pressed the button again. Now let us see what the mother of the bride thinks about her new in-laws. The video shifted. It was the sunroom, the secret conversation between Bernice and Linda Sterling. But I had edited it. I had included the parts Bernice thought Linda did not hear. The video showed Bernice talking to her friend on the phone while Linda was in the bathroom. I cannot stand that woman, Bernice's voice rang out sharp and hateful. Linda Sterling is white trash with a trust fund. She thinks she is better than us because she is white, but have you seen her teeth? And that house, it smells like old money and wet dog. But we need them. We need their whiteness to wash this family clean. Once Tiana marries that idiot son of theirs, we will take over their social calendar and dump them. The video cut to Bernice laughing. In the ballroom, Linda Sterling stood up. She was trembling with rage. She picked up a full bottle of champagne from her table. You two-faced witch! Linda screamed, hurling the bottle at Bernice. It missed her head by inches, shattering against the stage. I knew it! I knew you were just using us! Bernice shrieked, covering her head. Linda, that was taken out of context. I pressed the button again. The screen went black for a second, then lit up with a document. It was a PDF file blown up to 20 feet tall. University of Georgia, Office of Academic Affairs. Official transcript, Tiana Jenkins. The grades were highlighted in red. F, F, D-, F withdrawal. And at the bottom in bold letters, academic dismissal. Reason plagiarism and academic fraud. I turned to Dr. Holloway, who was standing in the front row, his face grim. Dr. Holloway, I said, I believe this is the student you were here to honor. Holloway shook his head slowly. He looked at Tiana with pure disgust. You lied to my face, Miss Jenkins. You forged the dean's signature. That is a felony. Tiana fell to her knees. Her dress ballooned around her like a collapsing parachute. No, 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 she sobbed. It is not real. She photoshopped it. Zara is a liar. I pressed the button one last time. The final slide appeared. It was a split screen. On the left was the deed to the Jenkins estate on West Paces Ferry Road. On the right was the deed to the Sterling estate in Buckhead. Both documents had a large red stamp across them, foreclosure. And underneath in the line designated for the new owner was one name, ZJ Holdings, LLC. President Zara Jenkins. I stepped out from behind the podium and walked to the edge of the stage. I looked down at my father, Marcus, who was clutching his chest. You signed the loan, Marcus, I said. You signed the confession of judgment. You gambled your house on a wedding you could not afford to a family that was just as broke as you are. I pointed to the screen. I own your house. I own the Sterling's house. I own the car you drove here in. I own the dress Tiana is wearing. I own the champagne you are drinking. I gestured to the entire room. I own this hotel. The silence was absolute. It was the silence of a world ending. "You have 1 hour," I said, my voice echoing. 1 hour to vacate the premises. If you are still here at midnight, you will be arrested for trespassing. And Tiana." My sister looked up at me, her makeup streaming down her face. "Leave the shoes," I said. "They belong to the company now." I dropped the microphone. It hit the stage with a thud that sounded like a gavel banging. Case closed. I turned and walked off the stage. Darius met me at the bottom of the stairs. He wrapped his jacket around my shoulders, covering the cheap server's uniform. "Ready to go, Madam Chair?" he asked. I looked back at the chaos erupting behind me. The Sterlings were screaming at the Jenkins. Tiana was trying to attack Brad. Bernice was on the floor, weeping into the carpet. "I am ready," I said. We walked out of the ballroom through the double doors and into the night, leaving the fire to burn itself out. The ballroom descended into absolute bedlam. It was not a slow burn. It was an explosion. The moment the foreclosure documents hit the screen, the fragile alliance between the Jenkins and Sterling families disintegrated like wet tissue paper. Linda Sterling was the first to snap. The woman who had spent the last week sipping tea with my mother and talking about lineage let out a shriek that sounded like a banshee. She lunged across the table, her hands clawing for my mother's throat. "You fraud!" Linda screamed, grabbing a handful of Bernice's expensive wig. "You told us you were liquid. You told us the house was paid off. We leveraged our construction firm based on your assets." Bernice shrieked, trying to hold on to her hairpiece as she stumbled backward into a waiter carrying a tray of shrimp cocktails. Cocktail sauce splattered across her emerald dress like blood. "Get off me, you white trash!" Bernice yelled back, slapping Linda's hands away. "You are the frauds. You came here to steal from us. I heard you in the bathroom. You wanted to use my house to pay your debts." George Sterling, red-faced and sweating profusely, grabbed my father by the lapels of his tuxedo. He shook Marcus like a rag doll. "I signed a personal guarantee because of you," George roared, spit flying onto my father's face. "You showed me fake bank statements. You told me Tiana was a partner at the firm. I am going to prison because of you." Marcus, usually so composed, looked terrified. He tried to push George away, but he was weak. "I did what I had to do," Marcus stammered. "We were just trying to survive. We thought Brad had money." "Money?" George laughed, a maniacal sound. "We have debt, Marcus. We have $12 million of debt that your daughter just bought." I stood on the stage, watching them tear each other apart. It was like watching rats in a barrel. The elite guests of Atlanta were no longer politely mingling. They were holding up their phones, live-streaming the brawl. The flashbulbs popped like fireworks, capturing every humiliating moment. Darius stepped up beside me, crossing his arms. He looked bored. "Should I call security?" he asked. "Not yet," I said, watching Linda Sterling pick up a crystal vase and hurl it at my mother. "Let them finish the renovations first." While the parents were engaged in hand-to-hand combat, the golden couple was having their own reckoning on the dance floor. Brad Sterling had managed to pick himself up, but he looked like a man who had just survived a car crash, only to realize he was standing in the middle of a highway. He looked at Tiana. The adoration he had feigned during his speech was gone, replaced by pure, unadulterated loathing. "You lied to me," Brad hissed, pointing a shaking finger at her. "You said you had a trust fund. You said you were a lawyer. I introduced you to my investors. I vouched for you." Tiana was sobbing, her mascara running down her face in black streaks. "I did it for us, Brad. I just needed a little more time. Once we were married, I was going to use the wedding money to pay off the ZJ grant. I was going to fix it." "Fix it!" Brad shouted. "You are a fraud, Tiana. You are a college dropout with a shoe addiction. You are nothing." He turned to walk away, but Tiana grabbed his arm. Her nails dug into his suit jacket. "Do not you walk away from me!" she screamed. "You used me. I heard the recording. You called me a cash cow. You tried to sleep with my sister." Brad shoved her off him. Tiana stumbled back, tripping over the hem of the $20,000 dress I had paid for. She hit the floor hard. Yeah, I tried to sleep with her, Brad spat, looking down at her. Because at least she has something to offer. She owns the bank, Tiana. You do not even own the shoes on your feet. He looked up at me on the stage. His eyes were desperate, pleading. Zara, look, he said, stepping toward me, his hands raised in surrender. We can work this out. I can help you. I know the construction business. I can manage the properties for you. I will leave her. I will testify against them. Just do not ruin me. I looked at him. He was willing to sell out his fiancé in a heartbeat to save his own skin. I do not need a manager, Brad, I said into the microphone. I need a janitor. But frankly, you are not qualified. The security team I had hired finally moved in. They were big, silent men in dark suits, creating a wall between the fighting families. The room quieted down, leaving only the sound of heavy breathing and sobbing. Tiana crawled toward the edge of the stage. She did not stand up. She stayed on her knees, the white dress pooling around her like a shroud of surrender. She looked up at me, her eyes swollen, her lip bleeding where she had bitten it. Zara, she whispered, her voice cracking. Zara, please. I looked down at her. This was the girl who had terrorized me for 2 decades. The girl who told me I was too ugly to be loved. We are sisters, Tiana sobbed, reaching a hand out toward me. We share blood. You cannot do this to me. You cannot leave me with nothing. They are going to arrest me, Zara. The university is going to press charges. I stood still, my face impassive. Mom made me do it, Tiana cried, pointing a trembling finger at Bernice, who was being held back by a security guard. She told me I had to be the star. She told me you were the sacrifice. I was just trying to make her happy. I was just trying to survive her just like you were. It was a clever pivot, trying to bond with me over our shared trauma, trying to make herself a victim. I was jealous of you, Tiana continued, the words tumbling out in a rush. I was always jealous. You were so smart. You were so talented. I knew I was empty inside. That is why I hated you. Because you were full. Please, Zara, I will do anything. I will sign whatever you want. Just give me a chance. Just save me. She grabbed the hem of my pants, burying her face in the fabric. Please, sissy, she wailed, using a childhood nickname she had not spoken in 20 years. Help me. The room watched, waiting to see if the Ice Queen would melt. They wanted a redemption arc. They wanted forgiveness. But I did not have forgiveness. I had receipts. I looked down at my sister clutching my leg. I felt a ghost of the little girl I used to be, the one who wanted to protect her baby sister. But then I remembered the bleaching cream. I remembered the basement cot. I remembered her laughing while Brad assaulted me with his words. I stepped back, pulling my leg away from her grip. Tiana fell forward onto the wood, her hands grasping at empty air. Get up, Tiana, I said, my voice echoing in the silent hall. You are staining the floor. She looked up, hope fading from her eyes, replaced by terror. You are supposed to help me, she whispered. You are the big sister. I leaned down, bringing the microphone close to my lips so everyone could hear the final verdict. You called me the ugly duckling, Tiana, I said softly. Remember, you said I did not belong in your swan lake. I straightened up, towering over her. Well, you were right about one thing. I am the ugly duckling. But you forgot the end of the story. The duckling does not just turn into a swan, it turns into something powerful. I looked at my mother, then at my father, then back at Tiana. And here is the thing about ducks, Tiana. Ducks do not save people. Ducks just swim. And right now I am swimming on a sea of money. You are the one who is drowning. I dropped the mic. It hit the stage with a final definitive thud. I turned to Darius. Let us go. The air in here is stale. Darius wrapped his arm around my waist. We walked down the stairs, stepping over the wreckage of my family. Bernice screamed my name as we passed, but I did not blink. I walked through the center of the ballroom, the crowd parting for us like the Red Sea. We pushed through the double doors and out into the cool Atlanta night. Behind us, I heard the sirens approaching. The police were coming for the fraudsters. I got into the waiting limousine. As the door closed, shutting out the noise and the chaos, I took a deep breath. "It is done," I said. Darius took my hand. "It is done." The car pulled away, leaving the St. Regis and the Jenkins family legacy in the rearview mirror. I did not look back. I had an empire to run. I stood by the open door of the limousine, but I did not get in immediately. I needed to see this through to the very end. I turned to the head of security, a massive man named Stone, who had been waiting for my signal. "Clear the floor, Mr. Stone," I commanded. "Remove them, all of them. If they resist, arrest them for trespassing. This is private property, and the party is over." Stone nodded once and pressed his earpiece. "Execute Protocol 0. Clear the ballroom." Through the glass doors of the hotel entrance, I watched the finale of the tragedy. A phalanx of uniformed security guards marched into the lobby. They were not the polite staff who held doors and smiled. These were the enforcers. Bernice was the first to be escorted out. She was kicking and screaming, clutching her pearls as if they could save her. Two guards held her by the arms, her feet dangling inches off the marble floor she claimed to love so much. "Unhand me," she shrieked, her voice cracking. "I am the mother of the bride. I am Bernice Jenkins. Do you know who I am?" The guard on her left did not even look at her. "Yes, Mom," he said, his voice devoid of emotion. "You are the individual listed on the Do Not Admit list, effective immediately. You are trespassing." They tossed her out onto the sidewalk. She landed on her hands and knees, scraping her palms against the concrete. Her expensive wig was askew. She looked up at me, her eyes wild with confusion and rage. "Zara," she screamed. "Tell them to stop. Tell them who I am." I looked down at her through the tinted window of the limo. I lowered the glass just an inch. "I already told them who you are, Mother," I said. "You are a liability." Next came Tiana. She was no longer walking. She was being dragged. Her $20,000 Vera Wang dress was torn at the hem, trailing behind her like a dirty rag. She had lost a shoe. She was sobbing uncontrollably, mascara streaming down her face like war paint. "My shoes!" she wailed, reaching back toward the lobby. I left my Louboutins inside. "You cannot keep them." Stone stepped in front of her, blocking her path. "Property of ZJ Holdings, Mom," he said, crossing his arms. "Items left on the premises by trespassers are considered abandoned." Brad Sterling was the last to emerge. He was not screaming. He was silent. He walked with his head down, handcuffed by the actual police who had arrived to serve the warrant for the fraudulent loans. As he passed my car, he looked up. His eyes met mine. There was no arrogance left, only fear. I rolled up the window. The sound of their wailing was cut off, instantly replaced by the hum of the climate control. "Drive," I said to the chauffeur. As the car pulled away, I watched them in the rearview mirror. A family of grifters standing on the curb in their ruined finery, waiting for taxis that would likely decline their cards. The St. Regis stood tall behind them, a fortress they had tried to storm and failed. They were on the outside now, and I had the only key. The sun had barely crested the horizon when the roaring started. It was not the gentle hum of a landscaping crew. It was the deep, guttural growl of heavy diesel engines. The ground beneath the Jenkins estate shook as if an earthquake were splitting the earth. Marcus Jenkins threw open the front door, wearing only his silk robe and slippers. He stared in horror at the armada of yellow bulldozers idling on his manicured front lawn. The smell of diesel fumes overpowered the scent of the jasmine bushes. Each massive machine bore the logo he now feared more than death itself. ZJ Urban Development. A foreman in a hard hat and safety vest walked up the front steps holding a clipboard. He did not remove his sunglasses. "You have 60 minutes to vacate the premises," Mr. Jenkins, the foreman, stated, checking his watch. "Demolition preparation begins at 8 sharp. Anything left inside the structure after that time becomes landfill." Marcus stammered, his face turning a sickly shade of gray. 60 minutes. That is impossible. We have furniture. We have antiques. We have a life in there." The foreman did not blink. 59 minutes. I suggest you grab the photo albums and the medication. We are not movers. We are wreckers. I watched the scene unfold from the back seat of my black SUV parked at the curb. The tinted window was lowered just enough for me to see the panic set in. Bernice ran out of the house. She was not wearing her expensive wig. Her natural hair was thin and graying, a secret she had guarded with her life. She wore a stained nightgown and no makeup. Without her armor, she looked small. She looked old. She looked defeated. She saw me. She did not scream this time. She ran toward the car, stumbling on the gravel of the driveway. She threw herself against the door, clinging to the handle like a drowning woman clutching a piece of driftwood. "Zara," she cried, tears cutting tracks through her night cream. "Please, baby. You cannot do this. This is our home. We raised you here." I opened the door and stepped out. My heels crunched on the driveway. I stood tall, looking down at her. "You did not raise me here, Mother," I said, my voice devoid of warmth. "You housed me here. Like a stray cat you forgot to feed. You hid me in the basement while you played queen in the tower." Bernice fell to her knees in the dirt. She grabbed my hand, kissing my knuckles. "I am sorry. I am so sorry, Zara. I was wrong. I should have loved you. I should have seen your value. Please forgive me. We have nowhere to go. We are ruined." I looked down at the woman who had terrorized my childhood, the woman who tried to bleach my skin, the woman who called me a stain on her legacy. I pulled my hand away. She fell forward into the dust. "You were not wrong, Bernice," I said coldly. "You were exactly who you always were, a climber, a user, a bigot. You are not sorry you treated me like trash. You are sorry the trash turned out to be gold. You are sorry the bank account you mocked is the only one that could pay your bills." I leaned down close to her ear so she could hear every syllable over the idling engines. "You are just unlucky, Mother. Because the child you threw away turned out to be the only one who could have saved you. And now it is too late. You bet on the wrong horse. And the race is over." I stood up and signaled the foreman. "Start the engines," I commanded. As I got back into the car, the sound of hydraulic drills piercing the brick facade filled the air. It was the loudest sound I had ever heard. And to me, it sounded exactly like justice. I watched my parents scrambling back into the house to salvage what little they could carry before their world came crashing down. Brad Sterling did not stick around to help Tiana pick up the pieces of her shattered life. He did not offer her a ride to the homeless shelter. He did not even look back. The moment the police released them pending further investigation into the loan fraud, Brad sprinted toward the only taxi willing to stop. Tiana tried to follow him, grabbing the sleeve of his wrinkled jacket. "Brad, wait," she pleaded, her voice a ragged whisper. "Where are we going? What are we going to do?" Brad shook her off like a piece of lint. "We are not doing anything, Tiana. You are toxic, you are broke, and you are the reason I am facing an indictment. Lose my number." He slammed the taxi door, leaving her standing on the curb in the rain, wearing a dress that belonged to my company and holding a shoe that had lost its heel. The fairy tale was officially over. The princess had turned back into a pumpkin, but there was no fairy godmother coming to save her. With no degree, a fraud record attached to her name, and every bridge in Atlanta burned to ash, Tiana faced a reality she had never bothered to imagine. She needed money. She needed food. And for the first time in her life, she had to earn it. 2 weeks later, I walked into the Gilded Fork for a light lunch. It was a high-end bistro in Midtown, the kind of place where my mother used to force me to apply for summer jobs because she said it was the only place suitable for someone with my lack of skills. I had washed dishes there for 2 summers while Tiana went to cheerleading camp. I sat at a corner table and opened the menu. A shadow fell over the table. I looked up. Standing there clutching a notepad with trembling hands was Tiana. She was wearing the standard issue beige uniform. It was 2 sizes too big, hanging off her frame. Her hair, usually so perfect, was pulled back in a messy, frizzy bun. Her nails were bare and chipped. She looked exhausted. She looked broken. She stared at me, her eyes widening in horror. She tried to back away to hide, but the manager was watching her from the bar. "Hello, Tiana," I said, unfolding my napkin. "I see you finally found a job that matches your skill set." "Please, Zara," she whispered, tears filling her eyes. "Do not make a scene. If I lose this job, I am on the street. I am sleeping in a hostel. It is a nightmare." I looked at her. I remembered the way she laughed when I was scrubbing the patio. I remembered the bleaching cream. I remembered her plotting to steal my inheritance. "I am not going to make a scene," I said calmly. "I am just a customer. And you are just a waitress. Now what is the special today?" She swallowed hard, her hand shaking as she wrote down my order. She was not the golden child anymore. She was just another anonymous worker in a city that did not care about her pedigree. She hurried away to the kitchen. I watched her go. She was learning the hardest lesson of all. The world does not owe you a living. And when you build a throne out of lies, you eventually have to scrub the floor beneath it. I left $100 tip on the table when I left, not because she deserved it, but because I wanted her to know that the sister she called worthless was the only reason she would eat that night. Karma had served its course, and it tasted delicious. The fall of the House of Sterling was not a quiet affair. It was a televised spectacle that gripped Atlanta for weeks. The construction empire that George Sterling had built on handshake deals and hidden ledgers crumbled the moment ZJ Holdings called in the debt. My forensic accountants had done more than just tally the numbers. They had found the bodies buried in the spreadsheets. George and Linda Sterling were arrested on a Tuesday morning. The FBI raided their temporary rental property, hauling out boxes of evidence that proved decades of tax evasion and money laundering. I watched the footage on the morning news while drinking matcha in my penthouse. Linda Sterling was trying to shield her face with a designer handbag that I knew was a knockoff. George looked defeated, a man who realized that his charm had finally overdrawn its limit. But Brad Sterling was a different story. He did not go quietly. He did not accept his fate. He ran. He made it as far as the private airfield in DeKalb County 3 days after his parents were taken into custody. He was trying to charter a private flight to the Cayman Islands, presumably to access offshore accounts that he believed were still safe. He walked up to the counter of the charter service wearing a disguise that consisted of a baseball cap and sunglasses, looking like a celebrity trying to avoid paparazzi. He slapped a platinum credit card on the desk. "1 ticket to Grand Cayman," he demanded, his voice trembling with a mixture of arrogance and panic. "One way. Fuel the jet immediately." The attendant swiped the card. It declined. He tried another. Declined. He tried a third. Declined. "Do you know who I am?" Brad shouted, slamming his fist on the counter. "I am Brad Sterling. My family built this city. Run the numbers again. The system is wrong." The attendant looked at him calmly. "The system is not wrong, Mr. Sterling. These cards have been flagged as stolen property by the issuing bank." Brad froze. "Stolen? That is impossible. These are my corporate cards." They were corporate cards, the attendant agreed. "But the corporation is now owned by ZJ Holdings, and the chairman, Ms. Jenkins, has reported unauthorized use of company assets. She also alerted the authorities that a flight risk might be attempting to leave the jurisdiction." Brad turned around slowly. 2 federal agents were walking across the tarmac toward him. They were not smiling. I was not there physically, but I saw the security footage later. It was my favorite movie. Brad tried to run. He actually tried to sprint across the airfield in his loafers. He made it about 20 yards before he was tackled. As they cuffed him, he was screaming. He was screaming my name. "Tell Zara I am sorry," he yelled, his face pressed against the asphalt. "Tell her I will sign whatever she wants. Just do not let them take me." He did not understand. It was not about what he could sign, it was about what he had already signed. The charges against Brad were extensive: wire fraud, bank fraud, identity theft, but the nail in the coffin was the loan application he had falsified using my company's name. He had tried to secure emergency funding by forging Tiana's signature on documents that claimed she was a silent partner in ZJ Holdings. He had tried to steal from me to pay the debt he owed me. It was a circle of stupidity that ended in a federal indictment. The trial was short. The evidence I provided was overwhelming. The video of him sexually harassing me in the hallway played for the jury. It established his character. The financial records established his crime. Brad Sterling, the golden boy of Buckhead, the man who told me I was only good for entertainment, was sentenced to 12 years in federal prison without the possibility of parole. I went to his sentencing hearing. I sat in the back row wearing a red dress. When the judge read the verdict, Brad turned and looked at the gallery. He saw me. He did not look angry. He looked broken. He looked like a man who had woken up from a dream to find himself in a nightmare he could not wake up from. I met his gaze. I did not smile. I did not gloat. I just looked at him. I wanted him to remember the face of the woman he called the help. I wanted him to know that every day he sat in that cell, every time he ate prison food, every time the door slammed shut, it was because he underestimated the girl in the kitchen. As the bailiffs led him away, he mouthed one word to me. Why? I did not answer. He knew why. He just wished he had never asked the question. The Sterling name was erased from the city. Their buildings were renamed. Their assets were liquidated. And Brad Sterling became a number in a system that did not care about his lineage. I walked out of the courthouse into the bright Atlanta sunshine. The air tasted cleaner. The city looked brighter. The trash had been taken out. And I was just getting started. The humid Atlanta heat hung heavy over the Whispering Pines apartment complex 2 weeks later. It was a generous name for a collection of crumbling brick buildings on the outskirts of the city, where the only thing whispering was the wind through the broken windows. Bernice Jenkins stood at the kitchen sink scrubbing a pot with a rag that had seen better days. She was not wearing her emerald silk or her expensive wig. She was wearing a faded housecoat that smelled of mothballs, her natural gray hair pulled back in a thin, severe bun. Marcus sat at the wobbly laminate table, staring at a red disconnection notice from the power company. "We have 3 days, Bernice," he muttered, his voice hollow. 3 days before the lights go out. I called Henderson. He blocked my number. Bernice slammed the pot into the sink. "Do not talk to me about Henderson, Marcus. Talk to me about how we are going to eat." The food bank is closed on Sundays. It was a pathetic tableau. The king and queen of Buckhead reduced to squabbling over scraps in a tenement. A knock at the door made them both jump. They froze, looking at each other with fear. They were expecting debt collectors. They were expecting the sheriff. They were not expecting me. Marcus opened the door. When he saw who was standing in the hallway, his knees nearly gave out. I stood there in a pristine white power suit flanked by 2 of my security detail. The contrast was blinding. I looked like a spaceship that had landed in a swamp. Zara. Marcus breathed, his voice cracking. Bernice rushed to the door, wiping her wet hands on her housecoat. Her eyes lit up with a desperate, hungry hope. "Zara, baby," she cried, reaching out as if she wanted to hug me. "You came. I knew you would come. You could not leave your parents like this. We are family." My security guard stepped forward, blocking her path with a massive arm. Bernice stopped, shrinking back against the peeling wallpaper. I walked into the apartment. It smelled of stale grease and despair. I looked at the stained carpet. I looked at the single bulb hanging from the ceiling. "Nice place," I said, my voice cool and echoing in the small room. "Cozy." Bernice burst into tears. "It is a nightmare, Zara. Look at us. Your father is sick. I am exhausted. We have nothing. Please, you have so much. Just a little help. A condo. A small allowance. We will go away. We will be quiet." Marcus fell to his knees. He actually fell to his knees on the dirty linoleum. "I am begging you, Zara. I made mistakes. I know that. But I am your father. Does that mean nothing to you?" I looked down at them. These were the people who had told me I was born to serve. These were the people who had planned to steal my future to fund their fantasy. It means something, Marcus, I said. It means I know exactly what you are capable of. I signaled to my assistant, who stepped forward and placed a manila envelope on the table. It landed with a heavy thud. Bernice looked at the envelope. Is that a check? I smiled. It was a smile that did not reach my eyes. Better, I said. It is an opportunity. Bernice tore open the envelope. Her hands shook as she pulled out the document. Her face fell. It was not a check. It was a stack of stapled papers. What is this? She whispered. I walked over to the table and tapped the paper with my manicured nail. It is an employment contract, Mother. ZJ Holdings recently acquired the custodial contract for the Mercedes-Benz Stadium. We have a shortage of sanitation staff. Sanitation? Marcus asked, his face turning gray. Janitors, I clarified. You scrub the toilets. You empty the trash. You mop the vomit after the football games. Bernice looked like she was going to be sick. You cannot be serious. You want me to clean toilets. I leaned in close. You told me I was built for manual labor, remember, I said softly. You told my friends I was the help. I am just giving you the chance to prove that hard work builds character. I straightened up. It pays minimum wage, no benefits, but it comes with a uniform. And since you are family, I will waive the background check. Marcus stared at the floor. I cannot do that, Zara. I am a businessman. You are unemployed, Marcus, I snapped. And you are broke. This is the only offer on the table. You sign it or you starve in the dark. I turned to leave. You have 24 hours to report to the supervisor, I said over my shoulder. Do not be late. He hates lateness. I walked out of the apartment, the sound of Bernice's wailing filling the hallway. I did not feel guilty. I felt balanced. I had given them exactly what they had prepared me for. The air conditioning unit in Unit 4B of the Whispering Pines apartments rattled and wheezed, spitting out lukewarm air that smelled of wet dog and stale cigarettes. It was 90 degrees in Atlanta, and the humidity inside the cramped living room was suffocating. Bernice Jenkins sat on the edge of a stained plaid sofa she had dragged in from the curb. Her once immaculate nails were bitten down to the quick. Her signature wig was gone sold weeks ago to pay for a security deposit, leaving her thinning gray natural hair pulled back in a severe, unflattering bun. She wore a faded housecoat that had a burn mark on the sleeve. Across the room, Marcus sat at a wobbly card table, staring at a stack of pink notices. The darkness of the room was not a mood choice. The power company had threatened to cut the line by 5 o'clock if they did not pay the past due balance of $140. You said you would handle it, Marcus Bernice snapped, wiping sweat from her upper lip. You said Henderson might give you an extension. Marcus did not look up. Henderson blocked my number. Bernice, I told you that yesterday, and the day before. We are toxic. No one will lend us a dime. Well, do something, she shrieked, standing up and pacing the small room. Go sell your watch. I sold the watch to pay for the moving truck, Marcus yelled back, slamming his fist on the table. The table shook dangerously. I have nothing left to sell. You are the one who insisted on keeping that storage unit for your winter coats. We could have paid the electric bill with that money. I am not losing my furs, Bernice hissed. Those coats are the only thing I have left that proves I used to be somebody. I am not going to rot in this hellhole wearing polyester. You are rotting in this hellhole right now, Marcus said, his voice dripping with venom. And you are doing it in the dark, because you are too vain to let go of the past. The arguing was a constant loop, a snake eating its own tail. They were trapped in the prison of their own making, blaming each other for the lock they had built together. Suddenly, a heavy knock echoed through the thin door. They both froze. Silence descended on the room instantly. They looked at each other with wide, terrified eyes. Is it the landlord? Bernice whispered. Maybe it is the sheriff. Marcus replied, his face draining of color. The knock came again. Louder, more authoritative. Open the door, Mr. Jenkins. It was not a man's voice. It was a woman's. Cool, calm, commanding. Marcus scrambled to his feet. He stumbled over a pile of old newspapers as he rushed to the door. He fumbled with the chain lock, his hands shaking. When he pulled the door open, the hallway light flooded the dim apartment. Standing there framed by the doorway like an avenging angel was Zara. She was wearing a cream-colored power suit that looked like it was tailored by the gods. Her shoes were red-bottom stilettos that cost more than a year of rent in this building. She wore dark sunglasses, which she slowly removed as she looked at her father. Behind her stood two massive bodyguards in black suits, filling the cramped hallway with an aura of menace and money. Zara Marcus breathed, clutching the doorframe for support. "You came!" Bernice scrambled up from the sofa. She smoothed her housecoat, a pathetic attempt at dignity that failed miserably. She rushed toward the door, pushing Marcus aside. "Zara, baby," she cried, tears instantly springing to her eyes. "I knew you would not abandon us. I told Marcus. I said Zara is a good girl. She understands family. Please come in. It is not much, but—" She tried to reach out to hug me. One of the bodyguards stepped forward, inserting his massive frame between us. He did not say a word. He just stood there, a human wall. Bernice recoiled, shrinking back against the peeling wallpaper. I stepped into the apartment. The smell hit me first. Despair, mildew, and the distinct odor of pride that had died a slow, rotting death. I looked around. I saw the empty fridge with the door slightly ajar. I saw the bucket collecting water from a leak in the ceiling. I saw the misery. I stayed silent. I let them sweat. Marcus fell to his knees. He actually dropped to the dirty linoleum floor, his hands clasped together in supplication. "Please, Zara," he begged, his voice cracking. "We are starving. We have not had a real meal in 3 days. They are cutting the lights tonight. Just a little help. A loan. Anything. We are your flesh and blood." Bernice joined him on the floor, grabbing the hem of my pants. I did not move. "We are sorry," she wailed. "We were wrong. We should have treated you better. You were always the smart one, the strong one. Save us, Zara. We are blood." I looked down at them. The king and queen of Buckhead reduced to beggars. "Get up," I said, my voice cutting through their wailing. "You are embarrassing yourselves." They scrambled to their feet, hope lighting up their eyes. They thought the checkbook was coming out. They thought the nightmare was over. I signaled to my assistant, who walked in and placed a thick manila envelope on the wobbly card table. Is that the deed to a condo?" Bernice asked, eyeing the envelope greedily. "Or a check?" I smiled. It was a smile that did not reach my eyes. "Better," I said. "It is a future." Bernice tore open the envelope. Her hands shook as she pulled out the document. Her face fell. It was not a check. It was a stack of stapled papers with a blue corporate logo at the top. "What is this?" she whispered. I walked over to the table and tapped the paper with a manicured nail. "It is an employment contract, Mother. ZJ Holdings recently acquired the custodial services contract for the Mercedes-Benz Stadium. We have a severe shortage of sanitation staff." "Sanitation?" Marcus asked, his face turning gray. "Janitors," I clarified. "You scrub the toilets, you empty the trash, you mop the vomit after the football games." Bernice looked like she was going to be sick. She dropped the papers as if they were burning her hands. "You cannot be serious," she gasped. "You want me to clean toilets? I am Bernice Jenkins." "You are a woman with an eviction notice and no lights," I countered. "And you are the woman who told me I was built for manual labor. Remember, you said I had peasant hands. You said I belonged in the back." I leaned in close, my face inches from hers. "I am just giving you the chance to prove you were right, Mother. Hard work builds character. Isn't that what you told me when I was scrubbing your floors?" I straightened up and looked at Marcus. "And you, Dad. You are on groundskeeping. You pick up the trash in the parking lots. It is minimum wage. No benefits. But it comes with a uniform. And since you are family, I will waive the background check. Marcus stared at the floor, his shoulders shaking. I cannot do that, Zara. I am a businessman. You are unemployed, Marcus, I snapped. And you are broke. This is the only offer on the table. You sign it or you starve in the dark. I turned to leave. The supervisor expects you at 6 a.m. tomorrow, I said over my shoulder. Do not be late. He hates lateness. I walked out of the apartment, the sound of Bernice's wailing filling the hallway. I did not feel guilty. I felt balanced. I had given them exactly what they had prepared me for. 6 months had passed since the yellow bulldozers tore through the facade of the Jenkins estate. The dust had long since settled and the ground had been purified. Where a monument to vanity and exclusion once stood, a beacon of glass, steel, and purpose now rose against the Atlanta skyline. We called it the ZJ Center. It was a crisp autumn morning, the kind where the air feels sharp and clean. I stood on the raised platform in front of the massive double doors. The building behind me was a masterpiece of modern architecture designed by my own firm. The exterior panels were a gradient of bronze, copper, and deep ebony designed to catch the light and celebrate the very skin tones my mother had tried so desperately to scrub away. A crowd of hundreds had gathered. There were reporters from every major network, city officials looking for a photo op, and community leaders who finally recognized the power of ZJ Holdings. But the most important guests were in the front row. They were young women, black women, dark-skinned women with natural hair and bright eyes, who looked at the building as if it were a temple. The mayor of Atlanta stepped up to the microphone first. He was a charismatic man who knew which way the wind blew, and right now the wind was blowing in my direction. Today is a historic day for Buckhead, the mayor boomed, his voice echoing off the glass walls. We are not just opening a building, we are opening a door. Thanks to the vision and generosity of Zara Jenkins, this site will serve as a sanctuary, a resource center, and a launching pad for women of color who have been marginalized by society and too often by their own communities. He stepped back, gesturing for me to take the stage. The applause was thunderous. It washed over me, not like the polite, fake clapping at Tiana's sham graduation, but like a wave of genuine support. Darius squeezed my hand. He looked impeccable in a slate-gray suit, the pride radiating off him like heat. Go get them, Madam Chair, he whispered. I walked to the podium. I looked out at the sea of faces. I looked down at the ground beneath my feet. This was the exact spot where the basement storage room used to be. This was where I had slept on a cot. This was where I had plotted my escape. Now I stood on top of it wearing a suit that cost more than my father's annual pension. I did not prepare a speech, I said, my voice steady and amplified across the lawn. I did not need to. The truth does not need a script. The crowd quieted instantly. 20 years ago, this land was a prison. I continued. It was a beautiful prison with columns and a fountain, but it was a prison nonetheless. It was a house built on the idea that some of us are better than others based on the shade of our skin or the texture of our hair. I lived in the shadows of this property. I was told I was too dark to be seen. I was told I was too ugly to be loved. I was told I was a stain that needed to be hidden away. I paused, making eye contact with a young girl in the front row who was twisting her braids nervously. I tore that house down, I said, my voice rising. I pulverized every brick. I shredded every timber. And on its grave, I built this. The ZJ Center is not just a shelter. It is a promise. It is a promise that no girl in this city will ever again have to hear that she is not worthy. No girl will ever be told she is too black, too loud, or too poor to succeed. If your family does not see your value, you come here. We will see it, we will polish it, and we will help you build your own empire. I picked up the oversized ceremonial scissors. The silver blades glinted in the sun. I dedicate this building to the girl in the basement, I said. She finally found the stairs. I sliced through the red ribbon. It fluttered to the ground. The crowd erupted. Confetti cannons fired, filling the air with gold and black paper. The music swelled. It was a moment of absolute triumph. 5 miles away, the atmosphere was very different. The Rusty Anchor was a dive bar near the airport, the kind of place where the floors were permanently sticky and the air smelled of stale beer and regret. It was the only place that would hire Tiana Jenkins pending her trial. Tiana was rushing between tables, balancing a heavy tray of pitchers and greasy burgers. She was not wearing white lace. She was wearing a stained black polo shirt that was 2 sizes too big and an apron covered in ketchup smears. Her hair, once her pride and joy, was frizzy and pulled back into a messy bun secured with a cheap rubber band. Her feet, shoved into discount non-slip sneakers, ached with a throbbing intensity she had never known in her former life. She stopped at table 4 to drop off a pitcher. Above the bar, a small static-filled television was playing the local news. "Breaking news from Buckhead," the anchor announced. Billionaire developer Zara Jenkins unveils the ZJ Center on the site of her former family home. Tiana froze. She looked up at the screen. There I was, radiant, powerful, surrounded by adoration. The camera panned out to show the gleaming building, the symbol of my victory and her loss. The headline scrolled across the bottom of the screen in bold blue letters. From outcast to icon, the Zara Jenkins story. Tiana stared at the image of the sister she had tormented. She saw the ribbon fall. She saw Darius kiss my cheek. She saw the life she thought she was entitled to lived by the person she thought was beneath her. The realization hit her like a physical blow. The envy was gone, replaced by a hollow, aching void. She had nothing. She was nothing. "Hey, Space Cadet," a rough voice barked. Tiana jumped. The tray in her hand tipped. Gravity took over. The heavy glass pitcher slid off the wet plastic. It hit the concrete floor with a shattering crash that silenced the bar. Beer and glass exploded outward, soaking Tiana's sneakers and splashing onto the pants of a customer. "You stupid girl," the customer yelled, jumping up. "Look what you did!" The manager, a man named Rick, who had a neck tattoo and zero patience, stormed out from behind the bar. He got right in Tiana's face. "What is wrong with you, Jenkins?" Rick screamed, spit flying. "That is the 3rd time this week. You are clumsy, you are slow, and you are costing me money." "I am sorry," Tiana whispered, tears welling in her eyes. I got distracted." "I do not pay you to get distracted," Rick yelled. "I pay you to work. You are useless, do you hear me?" "Useless." Tiana flinched. The word echoed in her head. It bounced off the walls of her memory. It was the exact word Bernice used to scream at me when I dropped a plate. It was the word Tiana used to laugh at when I tripped. "Get on your knees and clean this up," Rick commanded, pointing at the puddle of beer and glass. "Now, or do not bother coming back tomorrow." Tiana looked at the manager. Then she looked back at the TV. The segment was over. The screen had moved on to the weather. She slowly sank to her knees on the dirty, sticky floor. She grabbed a gray rag from her apron pocket. She began to wipe up the mess, picking shards of glass out of the puddle with her bare fingers. She was scrubbing the floor. She was the help. She was the one in the back. The karma loop had closed. The universe had balanced the books. Tiana Jenkins was exactly where she belonged. It was raining hard the following Tuesday. It was the kind of Atlanta rain that felt like a judgment, a deluge that turned the red Georgia clay into slick mud and washed the dust off the streets. The sky was a bruised purple, heavy with storm clouds that hung low over the city. I sat in the back of my Rolls-Royce Cullinan. The interior was a sanctuary of silence and cream-colored leather. The climate control was set to a perfect 70 degrees, keeping the humidity and the misery of the outside world at bay. Darius was seated next to me, his long legs stretched out. He was reviewing the flight plan for our honeymoon on his tablet. We were headed to the private terminal at Hartsfield-Jackson, where the jet was fueled and waiting to take us to the Maldives. The traffic on the interstate was gridlocked due to the weather. The driver, a man named Thomas, who had been with ZJ Holdings for 5 years, glanced in the rearview mirror. "There is an accident ahead, Ms. Jenkins." Thomas said, his voice calm over the intercom. "I am going to take the service road detour past the shopping centers. It might be a few minutes faster." I nodded, not really listening. I was looking down at the massive yellow diamond on my finger. It caught the ambient light sparkling with a fire that matched the one inside me. The car turned off the highway and navigated the potholed service road that ran parallel to the expressway. We passed fast food joints with flickering neon signs and pawn shops with bars on the windows. Then we came to a stop at a red light directly in front of a massive Walmart supercenter. I looked out the window. The rain was streaking against the glass, distorting the world outside into a blur of gray and blue. In the parking lot, amidst the sea of wet asphalt and abandoned carts, a solitary figure was struggling. It was an employee, a cart pusher fighting against the wind and the rain. She was wearing a bright blue plastic vest over a gray sweatshirt that looked soaked through. I narrowed my eyes. There was something familiar about the way the figure moved. A stiffness in the shoulders, a jagged, angry energy in the way she shoved the metal carts together. The wind whipped the hood of her sweatshirt back, revealing her face. It was Bernice. My breath caught in my throat for a fraction of a second. She looked frail. The woman who used to terrorize me with a single look now appeared small and insignificant against the backdrop of the massive store. Her face was gaunt, the skin sagging without the expensive fillers and creams she used to prioritize over food. Her hair, once her crowning glory of wigs and weaves, was plastered to her skull, thin and gray. She was struggling to control a long line of metal carts. The wheels were stuck in a puddle. She pushed and heaved, her feet slipping in the oil-stained water. A pickup truck pulled up next to her, blaring its horn. The driver rolled down the window and shouted something, probably complaining that she was blocking the lane. I watched Bernice's reaction. She did not apologize. She did not step aside. She slammed her hand onto the hood of the truck and shouted back. I could not hear the words through the soundproof glass of the Rolls-Royce, but I could read her lips. I could see the snarl on her face. She was fighting a stranger in the rain over inches of pavement. She was fighting for a shred of dignity she had lost long ago. She looked pathetic. She looked miserable. She looked exactly like the person she had always been on the inside, finally exposed to the elements. Darius looked up from his tablet. He followed my gaze out the window. He saw the woman in the blue vest. He saw the anger. He saw the poverty. He stiffened. Is that her?" he asked quietly. I watched Bernice slip on the wet pavement. She caught herself on the handle of a cart, wincing in pain. She looked up at the sky, her mouth moving in what looked like a curse. Then her eyes drifted toward the road. She saw the car. She saw the massive black Rolls-Royce idling at the light. She did not know who was inside. She could not see through the tinted privacy glass. But she stared at it, her eyes locked onto the vehicle with a naked, hungry envy. She looked at the symbol of wealth she had chased her entire life, the wealth she had tried to steal from me, the wealth she was now permanently locked out of. For a moment our eyes met. She was looking at her reflection in the black glass, seeing a wet, broken woman staring back at her. I was looking at a stranger. Darius tightened his grip on my hand. His thumb brushed over my knuckles. "Z, do you want to stop?" he asked, his voice low and gentle. "We have time. We can turn around. I can have Thomas give her something. Cash, a coat, anything you want." The light turned green. The car did not move. Thomas was waiting for my command. I looked at the woman in the rain. I thought about the little girl who waited at the window for a mother who never came home. I thought about the teenager who was told she was too ugly to be loved. I thought about the young woman who was forced to sleep in a basement storage room. I reached up and slowly removed my sunglasses. I turned to look at Darius. His eyes were full of love, respect, and a fierce protectiveness. He was my family. He was my future. Bernice Jenkins was just a cautionary tale. "No," I said, my voice steady and cold as the diamond on my finger. I do not want to stop. That woman out there is a stranger to me. The mother I wanted died 10 years ago. The woman in that parking lot is just a person who made bad investments and treated people like commodities. I reached for the button on the door panel. I do not know her, I said. I pressed the button. The electronic privacy shade began to rise. A wall of black silk climbed up the window inch by inch. It covered Bernice's wet sneakers. It covered the blue vest. It covered her angry, twisted face. She vanished behind the black curtain, erased from my view, erased from my life. Drive, I told the chauffeur. The engine of the Rolls-Royce purred a low growl of limitless power. The car surged forward, gliding over the wet pavement. We left the parking lot behind. We left the rain behind. We left the misery behind. I leaned back into the soft leather seat and closed my eyes. I took a deep breath of the cool, scented air inside the cabin. I was not angry anymore. I was not sad. I was not afraid. I felt a profound, quiet peace. I opened my eyes and looked at Darius. He smiled at me and raised my hand to his lips, kissing the ring that symbolized our union and our empire. "We are going to be late for the beach," he teased. I smiled back. "We are right on time." The car sped up, merging onto the highway that led to the private airfield. The city of Atlanta blurred past us, a memory in the rearview mirror. The most profound lesson from Zara Jenkins's journey is that your true value is never determined by those who lack the capacity to see it. Her family mistook her humility for failure and her silence for weakness, blinded by their own colorism and vanity. Zara teaches us the immense strategic power of building in silence. While her detractors focused on maintaining a facade of wealth, she focused on acquiring the reality of it. Furthermore, the story illustrates that toxic family ties are not obligations to be endured forever. Biology makes you relatives, but loyalty and respect make you family. Zara's ability to walk away from her mother in that parking lot symbolizes the ultimate maturity, realizing that you cannot save people who are committed to their own destruction. The sharpest weapon against disrespect isn't a screaming match, it is indisputable success. When you own the deeds, the banknotes, and your own narrative, you don't need to raise your voice to be heard. The best revenge is simply becoming the person they said you could never be. If Zara's cold, calculated victory gave you the satisfaction you were looking for, please hit that like button and subscribe for more stories about turning pain into power. Have you ever had to succeed in silence to prove your doubters wrong? Tell me your story in the comments below.